Coming up in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. It is April 7th, and this is the school committee meeting, and this is our first time back here at Town Hall in person in more than 2 years. So I'm so happy to see real human bodies in person and all your faces, and I'm happy that we can still involve anybody who wants to tune in online. So welcome to the school committee meeting. We will start by reading our vision statement. The Ashland Public Schools cultivates the academic and social-emotional growth of each student through a supportive, collaborative, innovative, and challenging environment. Students will develop into self-motivated, resilient, lifelong learners who embrace their role as responsible contributors to a global community. This meeting is being recorded by WACA Cable TV, and I can see them right over there, which is also very exciting. Our order of business this evening is our agenda review and adoption. Do we have student advisory?
We do.
We do. Excellent. We'll have some time for public comment, and our administrative items include a public hearing on school choice participation for the 2022-2023 school year, the Driscoll scholarship appointments, literacy update, Dr. Kyra, update on superintendent's goals, update on David Mendez Principal Search and Director of English Language Learner Search, recommendation from the naming subcommittee, i.e. Warren Softball Field nomination and recommendation, Mendez Building Project update, Mr. Kendall, superintendent update, assistant superintendent update, Warren approvals, approval of minutes, acceptance of gifts, committee reports of activities, member updates, action items, and then we will adjourn. So I will take attendance and ask if you are all okay with this order of business this evening. I'll start with you, Mr. Kendall, just to make sure you can hear me and I can hear you.
I am here, and yes.
Excellent. Tina Fatanides, I see that you're here.
Here and yes.
And Mark Terry.
Here and yes.
Okay.
I was trying to figure out where I'm hearing Paul's voice from.
Yeah.
Lori, I know you just voted on the order, but I was thinking about asking if we could move number 6 up to number 3, which is the recommendation of the naming subcommittee. So Mr. Cashin, who's here tonight, doesn't have to wait.
There.
He's up there.
Oh, sure.
I can see him
Where
here.
is he? Yes.
He's all over the place on these screens.
Okay.
But just so, because the literacy component, the goals, as well as Mr. Kendall's presentation,
Sure.
would be a little long. So.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it. I don't know what you're talking about.
Fair enough.
Put him on mute. Just kidding. No problem. So just, you might have to remind me, but I'm going to plan on it.
Yep.
Okay. We will start by asking our Student Advisory Council to fill us in on what's happening, please.
I can start. So for, in the last 2 months, some things that have happened are, so the junior and senior proms are coming up. The senior prom is actually tomorrow, in which some of the senior students will talk about that. But as a junior, I'm helping to plan the junior prom. We've sold all the tickets that we're going to sell, and we are almost totally planned for that event. So that's really exciting. A lot of people are getting really excited about that. Spring sports have started, with this week having the first competitions for many of the teams. The tennis team, both boys and girls, swept their first matches, which was really cool. And boys lacrosse also won their first game. The Give Kids the World trip happened last week and the week before, in which members of the Make-A-Wish Club headed down to Disney World in Florida and helped kids who their wish for Make-A-Wish was to go down to Disneyland. To go down to Disney World, and they helped cook food in a cafeteria as well as organize and facilitate events while down there. And then an upcoming event that's coming up is the London, Paris, and the Alps trip, run by EF Tours. That's happening over April break, and so all of the plans for that are almost done.
Excellent. Thank you. Who's next?
I can go.
So the academic decathlon qualified for nationals this year. It's the first time we've done that in 4 years, and we're all very excited to compete virtually over April break. Course recommendations were also done, and counselors are now working on creating schedules for the next year. Our sophomores took the English MCAS a couple weeks ago, and now they're prepping for the May Math MCAS. And finally, seniors are getting increasingly excited about graduation as more acceptances are rolling in and people are starting to commit to colleges more.
Excellent, thank you. Who's up?
I'll go. So 2 weeks ago, the NHS hosted a successful Bolero fundraiser, and many kids showed up and had fun bowling and competing with their friends. Also, Micah was last weekend with the AHS's 2 bands performing at the annual competition, winning bronze and silver. Despite COVID difficulties, the bands performed pretty well and had a good time. Last night, Stuco's bingo night was a success, and the AHS cafeteria was packed with students, families, and seniors from around town. Everyone had fun competing, and winners received gift cards donated from local businesses. Also, AP tests are starting at the beginning of May, so AP classes are starting intense preparation for the test.
Thank you.
All right, so the class of 2022 is hosting their senior prom at Lake Pearl tomorrow. Our theme is Enchanted Garden, and we will be having over 240 students and guests attending. The Grand March that precedes the prom is also taking place this year at Ashland High School inside of the gym. Seniors also took their seal by literacy test a few weeks ago in many different languages, and the scores for that will be released soon. So a lot of them are anticipating that. The senior class also sold their senior week tickets, and the week will include fun events like a trip to Kimball Farms, a senior class banquet, the Odyssey boat cruise in Boston. And seniors have also been committing to colleges recently, starting a new chapter as they transition into their adult lives.
Wow. Thank you.
I'll go.
Go ahead.
So, Amnesty recently did a fundraiser for Ukraine, helping the country obtain resources to protect its vulnerable people during this situation. The Model UN Club will be attending their second conference this weekend at Winchester High School. And this is great because aside from the last conference, this is the last in-person conference. It's over 2 years ago. So it's great to return to some normalcy. And senior graduation is going to be indoors in the gym again. And I don't know about you guys, but this is a relief because last year it was 90 degrees and sunny. And then you're sweating there for like 2 hours. So yeah, it wasn't very fun. And Ashland High School is also one of the only schools in the area to not limit any tickets, so everyone can come and enjoy the graduation. And lastly, the optional mask wearing policy, which started last month. A lot of students are enjoying it because they can take it off, but also keep it on if they don't feel comfortable doing so. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else? All right, guys, thank you so much. Lots of great things. When you're talking about graduation and prom, I can hardly believe that we're already there, right?
The time of year already.
I know, but all good, great stuff. So thanks again for all you do and for keeping us in the loop on what's going on. Next up, I'm going to ask if there's anybody from the public who would like to offer comment this evening. I don't see anything, and not sure if I see anybody in person in this audience, but certainly anybody who's on Zoom that would like to offer a comment, please raise your hand, and one of us will see you. Okay, seeing none, I will move on to the recommendation for the naming. Is that where you wanted to put that?
No, well, that'll be
After.
third. It'll be public hearing, then the
okay.
Driscoll, and then,
Okay.
yep.
All right, public hearing school choice participation for 2022-2023 school year.
So as you know, each year we come before you to determine whether or not we're going to continue to offer school choice seats at certain grade levels. So we do an analysis of expected enrollment and then try to make some decisions. I'm going to just share my screen here. Hopefully this pops up.
It's up there.
Yep, should be up there, and it should be, for those at home on Zoom, you should be able to see this as well. So what I'm showing here is that currently we have, this is moving all of the students from their current grade level down a grade level, right? So the 176 students in 12th grade, that's the current junior class, okay? So it's taking into account the step of where students will be moving into. Currently, this is as of a couple days ago, and Mr. Regan, correct me, who's here, we had 152 students currently registered for kindergarten. And I think what was important is to share with you where we were pre-pandemic and the first year, this year, I don't want to call it post-pandemic because we're still in it, but during the pandemic in terms of where our registrations were at this time, because I think it's important. So the far right of the screen, the registrations versus the actual. So as of this date, in 2019, we had 170 students who were already registered, with an ending of 227 students for the year. So there was a big pickup. But that was also, what we have to remember is that was the first year of our tuition-free kindergarten. So those students, so we anticipated a much larger increase because the registration process was occurring before town meeting. And after town meeting came forth, where it was tuition-free kindergarten, we certainly had more students sign up. Then we move into 2020, and you'll notice there's 176 students at this time, and we ended with 188. I don't know how many students actually left after March of 20 when we entered into the initial COVID in the shutdown. I think they all stayed where they were, but that was our group. And then this year, or last year, 21, we had 185 students, and 191 was our ending number. So right now we have 152. And while I would say we're anticipating another 25 to 30 kids, if we were to get in the 200 plus range, that's another 50 plus kids out there that have not registered. And that would be a remarkable increase. That's the reason I'm showing you the registered versus actual is you go back and look at 20 and 21, and it was 12 kids and it was 6 kids, right? So I don't know what that looks like. The NESDEC, who does our projections, is anticipating about 195 kids. So there's still that wiggle room of about 40 kids somewhere out there. But I don't know if that's going to exist or not. So as I look at the numbers, you'll notice that each grade level, we will determine how many school choice kids. So for Tina, so the process is I look at the numbers and say, how many could we really afford to add into our enrollment, right? And the way it looks now is at the kindergarten level, we could have 5. You know, I'm comfortable putting 5 down. That doesn't mean we're going to fill those spots. It just means as if we're going to approve school choice, that we go through with the numbers. Similarly, the second grade, which will now be the third grade, is 197 students. And we certainly could get 5 more seats there. And then all the other grades, with the exception of the high school, I'm not asking for any school choice seats. In years past, we were asking for 10 plus seats at each grade level. Because of our enrollment and how much it's increased, I've reduced it to 5 at each grade level. That being said, you'll notice we have 16, I'm trying to give you a really good snapshot of where we are in terms of our choice kids out and our choice kids in. We have 14 choice seniors. So those kids will no longer be with us. So that $5,000 a child, so it will not be with us. We have 16 kids who are from Ashland who are choicing out. And of those 16, we only have 3 that are seniors. But what I find interesting is if you look at the virtual schools, we have 7 kids it started with COVID, right? These 7 students have decided to stay virtually. I'll be curious to see what happens next year with those kids. But that being said, they're virtual now. And so if we're losing 16, typically we might pick up out of this 10, 20, 30 that I'm asking for, we might pick up 10. And quite often it might be a family that's moving, where their child is a sophomore or a freshman, and we've had that in the past, where they can then apply for choice. They've been here. The only students that can stay with us throughout the year would be a senior, right? So we don't move those kids out, but if you're a sophomore or a freshman and you're moving during the year, you're supposed to go to the district you moved to. But we've been fortunate that by creating these choice seats, these families are keeping their kids with us because they really value our system. They're just moving to another town for housing purposes or whatever it might be.
Jim, can you talk a little bit about how sort of you make the estimates? I mean, I understand just given on how many people are seeking school choice seats.
Right.
You know, there probably aren't going to be more than 5 in a given grade. But, you know, sort of the thought process I would look at, for example, is if you've got 230 kids in first grade, 237 in second, in kindergarten at substantially less, you know, can you think about it as, well, we can handle 230 kids per grade level, and if that's the thought process, you know, why couldn't it be 10 kindergartners as an example?
Yeah, we could. And it could be 10, but I don't know what that number's going to look like, right? So I'm being pretty conservative here with my estimate, and I think Pete would tell you I'd rather be conservative on that end. So how I would look at this is if we got up to 170 students, that gives us flexibility within Pete's personnel, right? We know next year's second grade class and first grade class are larger. So if we can move personnel to offset and reduce those class sizes. So I wouldn't want to add 10 or 15 choice seats in the kindergarten and have them all filled up. And now we're required to use those personnel in the kindergarten level when we know that it'd be more beneficial to potentially move them to a first or second grade to reduce class size, right? So when I look at the high school and why it's only 5, I mean, 225, 230 kids, you know, they're certainly more distributed because of the types of classes they take. That's why at the middle school I'm not asking for any. They're large classes currently, and we're not adding, you know, more staffing there for electives and those purposes. Certainly we're looking at the schedule. So, you know, that being said, I think 220 is a good number for us, Mark, across the board. And so none of these, so I anticipate, so the 9th grade, we have 232 students, but right now there might be 15 that are going to Keefe. That's what we're anticipating. So that number's truly 217. And we might pick up a couple students here and there. As you can see, I mean, we had one big year of the 11th graders, eight kids. And I know for a fact some of those kids were students who their families moved and they wanted to stay as freshmen. So you've got to go back in history to determine what that class size looked like at the time. And that's a challenge, right? Because we're seeing our numbers grow so quickly that we just don't know if these numbers are accurate from NESDEC. We're having them do our analysis twice a year now because it changes so quickly. Like I said, they're anticipating 190, 195 at the kindergarten level. I don't know where those kids are going to come from. Maybe they're coming out of the woodworks. Mr. Regan, you know, we'll figure that out. But
it wouldn't surprise me if people are just slower in making that decision, sort of coming out of pandemic. And these are folks who, you know, so those are 4-year-olds basically, you know, and I could understand why some parents might be a little slower making that decision going into next year. And,
but again, if we're looking from a historical perspective, that would be, you know, 50 plus kids. I don't know if there are 50 plus kids out there that their families haven't thought about next year for schooling. You know, God willing.
Find out.
For my point, I saw Claudia. You know, so what I'm asking for is, you know, to continue to participate in choice. It does help us from a financial perspective. We're using these funds to offset instructional supplies, you know, textbooks, things of that nature. While it's only $5,000 a child, I believe we can accommodate, if we had to, all of these students. So I would just ask that we continue to participate and then add 5 spots for kindergarten, 3rd grade, and 9 through 12.
So I think. we
Yeah,
got-
I'm going to open the hearing on that.
Yep.
And then ask for comments or questions.
But
or more
if we're doing the
questions.
public hearing, do you want to take comments from the
Comments
public
from the
first?
public?
And then we'll,
Anybody have anything they want to weigh in?
I'll stop share.
And that goes for everybody on Zoom as well. If anyone wants to share anything about that, please feel free.
wait, nothing
And
there.
then hearing none.
I guess we close the
Anything
hearing,
else
right?
from you guys? Close the hearing?
No, I mean, we can, I guess, deliberate. I'm comfortable with, certainly with what Jim's recommending. It seems, given, looking at the totality of it, and also given that we don't get all that many, you know, it certainly
Right.
seems fine. I don't see a big risk there.
Yeah.
No, I would agree. I
So,
think your presentation, you went, oops, sorry. I would agree. You know, I'm in favor of what you're proposing. I think any questions that I had in terms of, honestly, one of them was the incoming ninth grade class, that size. That was the one that concerned me, but I wasn't taking into account the kids that would be going to Key for other high schools. So I'm comfortable with what you're proposing as well.
Paul?
So just a question, Jim. The 3-year look back you did on the enrollment differences versus actual, or the registration versus actual, was it relatively consistent beyond that? Because really none of those years are typical, right?
Yeah.
2
Yeah.
years were pandemic years, and then we had the change in kindergarten, right?
Yeah, no, they were pretty consistent, Paul, in terms of, you know, again, our fluctuation between registration and beginning of the year was between 10 and 17 students when we did the look back for years. Similarly, that also in first grade, we've seen an increase because families kept their kids out even for kindergarten and just didn't transition until that first grade.
And Jim, just for clarity, are these additional seats to existing choice kids that we already have in-house, or do these numbers include them that you're talking about?
So for certain grades, yes. So the kindergarten, obviously, there are no choice seats yet, right?
Right.
The next year's third grade, we already had 5 choice seats, but only 2 are in. So the max we would have is 7, if that's what you're asking. And then the 8th grade going into 9th grade, we did not offer choice seats last year in the 8th grade. So 9th grade, there are no choice kids going that would be next year's current 9th graders. So these are 5 just additional spots.
But all of the numbers you talked about are new seats,
Correct.
not currently anticipated that are already going to be occupied.
That is
So
correct.
If we had somebody in that class, we're already counting them as our kids enrolled.
Correct. They're already part of the enrollment.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. And we have had some interest in choice already, so that's why we do it now, so we can let those families. It's a lot, not a lottery. It's a lottery if you have more seats than are anticipated or approved.
Right, and I think this is probably, I think Tina's first time going through it, and maybe it makes sense to just talk about that process, and that it's a first come, first serve kind of situation, and then the lottery, like you just said, so.
Yep. She's good with it, she said. So.
Cool.
All right, are we ready for motion?
I move to approve the school choice participation for the 22-23 school year as presented.
Second.
And then all in favor, Paul?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
An aye for me. Thank you. Next up, the Driscoll scholarship appointments.
So each year, we have a scholarship at graduation, the Driscoll Scholarship, and there's a committee that's formed with some outside, a teacher, an outside, Mary Lou Hunt has traditionally been that. She was our former business manager years and years ago. And then a school committee member and our current business manager and the director of guidance. That being said, we need to have a vote on the community member and the teacher, as well as a school committee member, to appoint them to this committee so they can get their work done and go through the criteria and choose the scholarship winner for this year. Obviously, Chris is already on the board. Corey McGann is the guidance staff member at the high school. I will say Erin Williams has traditionally been the individual.
Last couple of years, she's
Yeah.
I think
she's
I
done
actually
it.
did it
Did you
last
do it
year.
last year?
I think I did
Did you?
last
Okay,
year.
Yeah.
so great.
Yeah, I've done it a couple times in the past.
Okay, so we
It's
do
one
have
meeting.
we do have the interest. It's one meeting. We do have the interest in Mary Lou Hunt again, as well as Lauren Giambetti. So
I'm happy to do it again. I actually liked doing it last year. It's
Excellent.
it's
Yeah.
kind of an interesting process. So,
Unless anybody else
Yep.
wants to
That's fine with me.
weigh in.
Okay.
Okay. We have a motion to appoint Mark to.
so I think you need all the other folks.
Yeah, we
Jen,
do.
you-
We need, yes, please. You want to read
Yeah.
that?
I'm going to pass it down.
So, and we're just appointing these two individuals plus myself?
Plus yours- Yep,
Okay.
correct.
So I move that we appoint Ms. Mary Lou Hunt as the community member, Ms. Lauren Giambetti as the high school teacher, myself as the school committee representative to the
Driscoll.
Driscoll Scholarship Committee.
Fund, yeah,
Yeah.
appointment, yeah.
Second.
And then all in favor, Tina?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
And I. Thank you.
Great.
Keep this, oh, do you need this, Jim?
I don't need it.
I say we'll keep
I
it
can
nearby
keep
for
moving.
for
I'm
the
good.
motions.
You can use it if you want.
Thank you. And now we're going to move down to the Mendez, to the recommendation from the naming subcommittee, i.e. Warren softball field nomination and recommendation.
Right, thank you. And Jim, I'll give you a minute to speak here in a second. But I want to go back through the process. I'm going to share my screen again. So we're all clear as to where we are and what we've been through. So going back to the fall, there was a request. Oh, it's a slideshow. I don't want a slideshow.
You gave it away.
View, sorry, enter full screen. So there was a request from the Ashland Youth Baseball and Softball to consider renaming the Warren School Field after Mr. Andy Limburner. And as part of our process and school committee policy, we needed to create the school committee asked us to create a subcommittee to look into the recommendation as well as then come forward with our own recommendation for the board to consider. And I think what's important is we've had a number of really good conversations with regard to what we're recommending tonight, and I think it's important. I'm going to show you a couple things, what was originally the request, and then where we landed as a subcommittee and what our formal recommendation is. But I think it's important to understand that, I put the names up here. We've had a number of folks who came to these meetings to weigh in on the requests. So what you see tonight, all of us on the subcommittee are unanimously in support of presenting it to you tonight. So the recommendation, so I'm going to go down a screen. This was originally what was proposed, and it was, on the Warren Field. It was welcome to the Limburner Field, home of Ashland girls softball. And as we've talked a lot about within the subcommittee about appropriateness of naming on school property or naming something from the school. While Andy had this phenomenal impact on our softball program and our young ladies and was, in all accounts, this awesome coach and person, was it really appropriate to actually change the name of the Warren School and the Warren Fields versus having a dedication at the site for Andy? And this was the original sign that was developed. And it's a beautiful sign. I've seen it. I went down. We looked at it. It's going to be in a position. There's a post there. It will not impact any of our maintenance because actually Ashland Youth Baseball and Softball do most of the maintenance around it. And so after having our further discussion, our recommendation to the school committee is this. Oh, I can get down one more. Sorry. Is that to keep with the spirit of not only our policy, but to honor Andy as well, and thank you, Esmer, who's out there in cyberspace somewhere tonight, for taking the sign for us and helping, shift what the wording will look like. But now instead of saying welcome to the Andy Limburner Field, it's welcome to the Warren School Fields. So it still has that Warren piece. But the sign is being dedicated in memory of Coach Andy Limburner. And I think it really meets all of our needs, and I'll let Jim speak to that in a moment. but we're all 100% comfortable with this. I think it meets the spirit of our policy. As we look at the way it's written, you know, the policy on school property, you all are responsible in the end for looking at how it impacts our schools. And it's ultimately up to you. We have to have 2 meetings to allow, we present it tonight, and then in 2 more meetings we can take an official vote, should you desire. So, Jim, I'm going to just turn it over to you because I know it's important that you have some words to say about the process probably, but also where we landed as a subcommittee.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. And just thanks everybody for your time. So yeah, I would say we had some really good, healthy discussions here over the last couple months, and it was good, good for us to kind of learn, okay, here's the reasons why, we would, not want to necessarily rename the field itself. And, that makes sense. But, we do want to, try and honor Andy. We felt that there was a really strong connection between him and that field. That's one of the themes that just kept coming up over and over again, but it's just a real consistent message. When we talked about Andy and his contributions, just, high character, very, had an inclusive way about him, helped us build the program in that way. So, everything about that just kind of kept hammering home the same point. So we did want to honor him, and, we do want to honor him, and, we'd like to be able to honor him in some way at that field. And, we're hoping this strikes the right balance and is appropriate. So I do appreciate everybody's time and consideration, and special thanks to Mr. Adams for taking us through that process. It was really, I thought, a good, we had some good, healthy discussions and very professionally done. So that was much appreciated.
Thank you.
Jim, that's the first time professional and Jim Adams ever went together,
And the last.
And the last probably. So, but that being said, so we're not looking for a vote tonight. If you have questions for us, again, the way the policy is designed is we present it in public session tonight, and then in the next 2 meetings, we would vote on the recommendation from the subcommittee.
So do we need procedure? Do we need to have this on the agenda 2 more times or just one more time?
No, just one more time. It
Okay.
allows for community feedback, so we present it tonight, but we've already received community feedback. That was part of the process we undertook before.
Right, and those were public meetings.
Those
You've
were
been
public
posting
originally,
them.
but this is an official recommendation tonight, so
Yeah.
now we're, moving forward with the process.
But you do all have an opportunity to ask about the process or the recommendation or anything about it that you need more information before being able to vote on something next time. Now would be the time
I
for
don't think I have
discussion.
any questions, no.
Yeah.
No, I didn't have any questions. I wanted to thank Jim and Mike. I think you were part of it. Chris maybe as well, and all the citizen participants, because I know it's obviously someone that you all, the people who brought this forward, Jim and the other group that was involved. I know this is certainly a very close personal tie, and I really appreciate that you were able to work with the administration to come up with something that really works and does, as you say, kind of strikes the balance and meets everyone's needs. So I really appreciate the committee's work. I certainly am perfectly fine with the recommendation and understand we're not voting on it yet, but wanted to voice that.
Paul, did you have anything you wanted to add? I don't want to forget about you out in Cyberland.
That's why we put them in that little box.
Don't you wish you could do this all the time to me? Yeah, I mean, I want to thank the group too, because when this first came up, I know there was a lot of questions about it and a lot of reactions to it in all sorts of ways, right? Because you really wanted to do this. I think everybody is supportive of honoring him. From I didn't know him, but from what everybody says, sounds like the right thing to do, right? And Jim, just from a process perspective, what are we going to be voting on? Because what you showed us tonight is taking a previous sign and kind of just rewording some stuff, right? Which I am 100% in support of whichever way we go. But are we going to vote on something specific, or are we going to vote on just the language and not caring? Because quite frankly, I know the reasons why the sign looks like it is, but to me, the prominence of the dedication could be, more significant, on it, right? So it doesn't need to be relegated to, and I understand that was just kind of put on there in the same sized fonts and stuff like that as the old sign, right? Which, but you see where I'm going with that? Because we don't have you don't actually have the sign at this point, right? That
Correct,
you wanted.
Paul. Yeah, it needs to be, Jim and the AYBS need to get in touch with Lou Mancini to modify the sign that does exist. So, or figure out, it's really the wording that I'm asking for the school committee to approve, and the location. So
Right. We're
that's
voting
really it.
on allowing something to be placed.
They've got to do the work on that end. They didn't want to move forward with anything until they felt comfortable that this is most likely going to be something they do. And softball's starting and has started, I think, and they want to be able to get this done for the spring.
Yeah, and I wanted to provide that clarity to them when they go back to try to redo or get the final sign and what we are approving. And I think it's important to say we're approving the language.
Yes.
You figure out the right proportions of the things, right? So want to give them the flexibility and freedom to do that, right? And that you're not, beholden to what we just saw and having that the dedication part be such a little subscript almost, right? But that the wording says in dedication to him in whatever proportion is appropriate, right?
Yeah, thanks, Paul, for clarification. It was just, again, that was Esmer just doing an overlay for me so we could get the wording so you could see what the sign would look like.
Yeah, totally get why it was done. Nothing wrong with that, but didn't want them to think they had to go off and do exactly that, right?
Yeah, no, thank you, Paul. Good for raising that. So, yeah, I mean, I think that the wording is kind of what we're really looking to key on. I mean, how it actually goes on the sign, it may depend even on, what Lou can do there to rework it. So, well, but we would definitely try and, stick to, what we're presenting here. Maybe a few tweaks needed, but the wording itself would be kind of what I think we're trying to lock in on.
Yeah, and I have no concerns about approving this request. I think the process was what it was supposed to be. I'm glad that it went to subcommittee. I'm glad you guys took the time to really explore the whole thing. And I feel confident that you came out with the right recommendation. So no issues here. And I look forward to the next meeting when we can make it official.
Great. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night, Jim.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Are you ready for the literacy update, Dr. Cairo?
Yes, so I just shared my screen.
You might need to turn your mic on, Mike.
My screen is shared, the mic is on, ready to go. Okay, so this is exciting, really. I'm happy to be able to do this, to share with you some of the great things that have happened this year in particular. And before I even get started, I think it's really important for us to acknowledge the work of a couple different individuals, mainly Kate Altman, who's our assistant principal at the Warren School, and Kathy Ferrecchia, who is our new literacy coach, K-5 literacy coach. These two ladies have done so much work throughout the entire year to make sure that all of our students, K-5, are getting what they need in terms of the right programming and just, that old term, what I need now. That's what they're doing, and that's what they're making sure is happening, and they're going to really push us moving forward. So we're lucky to have them, and they put a lot of work into this particular slide presentation as well. What you're going to hear tonight is just some things that are sort of based on DESE recommendations. Kate and Kathy have been going to monthly literacy meetings that have been sponsored by DESE, and they have the opportunity to speak with a variety of folks from across the state who are all there for the same reason, right? To make sure that everyone is doing what is best for students in the area of literacy. We're going to talk about some materials that we're using, some assessment tools that we're using, and really to tell you right now where we are, how we're using some data. We're going to look at a little bit of data, some next steps, and then hopefully a few takeaways for you as we move forward here. So the first thing I want to show is this wonderful reading continuum, and this is one of the things that's been provided by the state for us to look at regularly as we make decisions. And you'll notice this first slide is really, this is the continuum of reading skills, what the instructional focus areas for reading is, and it's the building blocks of literacy, for lack of a better term. Once we go up these steps, ultimately our students should become advanced comprehenders of literature, right? We want them to make sure that they're understanding what they read and being able to do so fluently. How do you get there, though, right? You've got to follow all these different steps, and it starts with letter sounds from the very beginning. So what we did, and what Kathy and Kate have done, is they've decided to say, what are our instructional focus areas, and what are we doing, and what are we looking at to make sure we're actually hitting all of these different steps. So if we want to make good decisions, we've got to make sure we're aligning our assessments to target these specific skills. So how are we going to make sure that students are moving up the continuum? You'll notice a lot of acronyms, right? Literacy is the acronym game. We're going to play the alphabet bingo a little bit. So I've got a slide later on that could teach you about some of these acronyms if you want to. But essentially, all of these different acronyms stand for different skill sets that our students need to understand. So for instance, when they're just learning letter sounds, we want to make sure that they're understanding what nonsense word fluency is. We've got to make sure that they're looking at how many words they're reading, just in their letter sound fluency. So we've got to look at all of these things. As they develop those things, we're going to then look into oral reading fluency and accuracy, and then words count per minute. And eventually, we're going to be testing them in more than just their letters and their sounds and their words. We're going to be testing them in their ability to actually understand and comprehend what they have been reading. So you've got the skills that need to be developed. You've got the assessments that are being used to determine where these students are. Then we've got to understand what are we doing at the different levels to make sure that our students are learning on a regular basis. So in this, like as this slide says, with guidance from DESE, we've chosen some intervention materials, and we also have some Tier 1 materials that we're using on a regular basis. We're trying to base everything right now on a multi-tiered system of support. That's where we're moving. That's where we're making sure we're getting to. You're going to hear that terminology, MTSS, as we move forward. So what are we doing? Well, we've started using Hagerty. Hagerty is a phonemic awareness and a phonological awareness program that teaches foundational skills for our students at the lowest levels. I'm really excited to tell you that next year, and we'll get to that later on, next year we're going to be incorporating that at the pre-K level as well, but we've begun using that as an intervention strategy for our youngest learners this year already. On top of that, we're using Foundations. Okay? Foundations is also a great Tier 1 everyday foundational support process for students as they learn phonics. Okay? Those things combined with decodables and some level text are going to help us in the beginning stages of moving up that continuum. Next year as well, we're going to be bringing in Foundations to the grade 3. So not only will it be K2, Mrs. Bennett's staff over at Mendez will be trained, so we have it K3. And we also are going to continue using the Calkins workshop model. We really feel confident right now that I've joked around and called this sort of our literacy cocktail of choice, that we've created this wonderful blend of what we think are great ingredients to make a really successful literacy opportunity, literacy programming at Ashland for our kids. So these are the materials that we're using. Foundations is K-2. Next year, as we said, will be grade 3. The units of study and reading is a K-5. That's more traditionally called Calkins, Lucy Calkins units of study. We do that for reading and writing in K-5.
Can I just ask you,
Sure.
interrupt you, when you're using that term, can you just explain what a unit of study is? I mean,
yeah, so it's really, so the units of study, the Lucy Calkins materials are broken down into different units. So for instance, in writing, one of them might be teaching the students about narrative writing. So that would be her particular unit. That's the study. For reading, they might be looking at a particular genre during that time. So for perhaps they're focusing on poetry, so that would be the unit. It's sort of the title. Am I saying that accurately? It's really just sort of the title of what we call things.
Okay.
Just, when you do a different science unit, you might be doing a unit on erosion. So that's it.
And given the different curriculum standards for comprehension.
Yeah. So that's K-5. In 3 to 5, we're using Words Their Way right now. I would be remiss to not mention that we're really analyzing that to see if Words Their Way is truly the best program that we want to be using for students. We have been moving towards Lexia as a model that we think is a little bit better, and we have been really utilizing Lexia for our grade 3 through 5 students. But right now, Words Their Way is used as for word work and some of that phonemic awareness stuff for the higher level students, but we're not sure if it's the right fit for Ashland. Lexia is probably a better fit for us at this point.
Mike, is Lexia all online? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was going to ask the same question.
Yeah.
Like, do you have access to
Yep.
both?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
We do. Yeah.
And is Lexia all online, or is there a in-person component to it too?
So the majority of Lexia is online. Yeah, and it's really being used as a tier 2, tier 3 intervention right now for our students. It's not really being widely used as a tier 1. It's more of a tier 2, tier 3 intervention. And we've used Words Their Way sort of as a tier 1 support, but we want to see if we can incorporate it more for everybody. Assessment tools. How are we making sure that we understand what our students are doing? Well, we've talked about those different little acronyms for letter ID and whatnot. We use Dibble's 8th this year. And next year we're going to be continuing to use Dibbles through a different program called M-Class. We look at high frequency words, benchmark assessments. The benchmark assessment system, also known as the BAS, is how we're measuring students' comprehension. Foundations has different units to make sure that the students are progressing along. We have other assessments that we do as well. 3-5, we're also using iReady. This iReady gives us just a little bit more data in terms of comprehension, and this helps us to also offer students some immediate lessons and supports based on what they're doing. iReady is a digital program that we can utilize that offers sort of that immediate student-centered lesson that's based on skill development.
Like this may sound like a kind of basic question, but you've referenced already just in the last couple of slides, multiple, there's Foundations, there's Culkins, there's Words Their Way, Lexia, Dibbles.
We're doing a lot.
And you're probably like at 14 more. Is there a reason why there isn't like a single integrated thing that you just say that this is what you're doing?
Yeah, there is. So it's, one of the things that we've learned is that you, first of all, need multiple measures of assessment data to make sure you're getting everything in terms of the students. So this is all the different assessments we use. Dibbles gives us much different information than what the BAS gives us. The BAS does not measure phonemic awareness, does not measure letter sound fluency, does not measure nonsense word fluency, doesn't measure oral reading fluency. It measures comprehension. The Dibbles doesn't measure comprehension. So you've got to make sure that you have both of those things to understand a student as a whole reader, as a true reader. Are there tools out there that might do everything? There could be, but we don't have those right now in place. This is what we have right now. In terms of programmatically, many folks will say that one of the weaknesses of the Lucy Calkins units of study, and I was including me, is that it does not have a true way of teaching students phonemic awareness and phonological awareness. So what did we need to do? We need to get our folks who are in the front lines figuring out what our kids need. And that's how we came to the knowing that we needed to bring in Foundations. Well, Foundations wasn't answering all of our questions either, and solving all of our problems. So that's why Hagerty comes into play. So while it seems like
You're
there's
up
all
to
these
14
things,
now. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's just a need. There's a need to bring in as many things as possible to make sure our kids get exactly what they need.
Yeah.
And we're dedicated to making those decisions. If there was this one panacea thing, bring it along.
Yeah.
We'd be doing it if it existed.
But what that also means, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars. So what we're doing is we're knowing that we've already committed some time, energy, money, professional development, training to certain programs, and now how can we supplement those with things that are going to be easy to implement, easy to train, and also super effective. And that's where Hagerty and foundations come into play. Does that answer you for the most part?
I'm gonna keep track of the count, though. Go
Okay,
ahead.
all right. So,
Yeah, it does, thank you.
what have we done to date? We have successfully implemented Foundations K-2, and if you walk around the Warren School right now, you are going to be seeing that used regularly, and you're going to be seeing it used quite well. They're doing a wonderful job. Kudos to all of the staff there, specifically, I'm going to say it again, Kate and Kathy, for helping folks get in there and making sure that they're doing it well. We're continuing our intervention strategies, most specifically using Hagerty. It's wonderful that right now our ESPs at Warren have been trained in Hagerty, so they're able to take small groups and make sure that they are incorporating those skills on a regular basis. We've initiated data meetings. While I can say that we've tried to do this for a long time, we're making such tremendous strides with how now we're actually looking at data and using the data to drive our decision-making processes. And this is something that DESE is telling us we need to do. It's a DESE mandate now to have 5 data meetings a year. And particularly at the lower elementary level, they really have sort of honed in on specific data meetings. And Mendez is doing it as well. But we're excited about where we're going to be going here. And then we have to continue to build this amazing book room. Part of the units of study, one of the most important things about the units of study is to be introducing students to age level appropriate, grade level appropriate, authentic literature that is going to keep them excited about learning and to develop an ultimate love of learning for a lifetime. And if we can continue to bring in books and build our book room to make sure that we have a plethora of titles and different genres for our students, we're putting them in the right spot. But most specifically, we've got to make sure we have culturally responsive texts. So we're focusing on that to make sure that we have a diverse representation of text for all of our student population.
How do you do that? Are there resources out there that sort of give you, here's a bunch of books you should look at, and you pick from them, or?
Yeah, there's tremendous resources. For instance, I met with a woman from Scholastic a couple months ago. They've actually got lists that are called their culturally responsive lists. But we've got some really skilled folks, particularly our librarians. I think of the work that Lisa Lamphere has done over the course of the last few years to make sure that she's built up the Mendez library to be culturally responsive. We've got folks such as I'll mention Alexa Fuller at Mendez. It's a passion of hers. So we look to these folks to say, what are some books that you would make sure you're recommending that we have to get in the hands of all of our students?
Great, thank you.
Again, what have we done to date? We've assessed students in K2 using Dibbles 8th, and this is to monitor our students that are at risk for dyslexia. As you know, this has been a huge push nationwide, but specifically in Massachusetts, to make sure we have a dedicated dyslexia screener. This is something that we've done this year, and we've used the Dibbles 8th.
Mike, is that what we're going to use moving forward for our dyslexia screening?
So M-Class includes the Dibbles 8th. So I keep on saying M-Class because it's this wonderful program that's going to allow us to have a tool to disseminate the data for us, and then we can break it down and move it around and help us rather than everybody doing it themselves. And so yes, but
the Dibbles is
but
like
the
the main
Dibbles is their instrument. Yeah. So what does the Dibbles measure? Here's where you get into your nice acronyms, Mark. So letter naming fluency, phoneme segmentation fluency, nonsense word fluency, word reading fluency, and oral reading fluency. These are the major themes of what we're looking at when we're looking to see if one of our students could be at risk for dyslexia. There's different subtests of the Dibbles that looks at each of these things. So what did we find? When we actually took a look at the data, we determined that 29% of our kindergarten population is in need of intensive intervention. It's a lot of students. It's a lot of kids. I'm sure that, though, we all understand that we need to be looking at this data with the knowledge that we were just in a global pandemic and students weren't necessarily getting what they needed when they needed it. But that's gives more reason to why we need to be doing these things. In kindergarten, you're looking at letter name fluency and phoneme segmentation fluency. Those are the two major factors to determine whether or not a student might be at risk for dyslexia. In grade 1, it's letter naming fluency, phoneme segmentation fluency, and nonsense word fluency. Essentially, nonsense words, can they read words that Dr. Seuss might create, fake words that are going to be phonetically sound to make sure that they can actually sound out those words. Only 11% of our population in grade 1 were flagged, and 9% of our second grade population were flagged. Again, grade 2, you're looking at letter naming fluency, nonsense word fluency, and word reading fluency. So what are we doing with these kids? They're getting a double dose of phonemic awareness. They're in strategy groups. They're getting phonics on a regular basis.
Will that be like tier 2 support?
That's tier 2, and sometimes it could end up being tier 3, but we want to make sure that these students are getting strong tier 2 supports. They're meeting with literacy specialists on a regular basis. They're getting pulled out to make sure that they're working on specific subsets of skills that are directly related to what we learn through these assessments.
So can I ask a quick question about this?
Sure.
So my understanding of the DIBELS is that the kids that are flagged as needing intensive intervention are those kids that are in that kind of well below benchmark category. So what about how many kids and what's the percentage of kids, I guess, that we have in that below benchmark that's kind of in between those that need intensive supports and those that are meeting benchmark?
So,
and what does that look like in terms of meeting their needs?
Yeah, so I'm gonna, Kate, I don't know if you probably don't have that exact data off the top of your head, but if you want to step up and just say a couple quick things on that.
Sure. So what we did at Warren is that we looked at every single student, all 650-something students, and we definitely looked across the board, the kids that were scoring red in every single category up there of the subtests. And those, like we said up here, are the kids that need that intensive intervention. And then we looked at the kids who are yellow, so moderate, still not meeting benchmark. And then we flagged those kids to provide them with some sort of intervention based on the needs and the subtests that they were scoring relatively low in. And then we also looked at the kids that were scoring green, were meeting benchmark, and said, well, we don't want to forget about these kids either, so what can we do to further their development in the reading process? So we set goals for each student, all 650-something students. I don't have that number, Pete does, but thank you, 665. So we set individual goals for every single student and aligned appropriate interventions to meet those goals. And then we're meeting again in 8 weeks.
And so will a lot of those kids kind of in the, those kids that might need those strategic intervention in the yellow group that you talked about and in the green group, would their goals be met in the general ed classroom? So with that kind of tier 1 support with the general ed teachers versus interventionists, or maybe it depends on the kid?
Yeah, it depends on the specific needs.
Okay.
And what you're going to see later on is we're going to take you through sort of that data meeting process, which is how they made the decisions, and then there's going to be a specific goal form which will show you. I mean, as Kate said, when you're looking at 650 students, everybody's getting a different goal, and some of them will be met through tier 1. Some of them are going to be met through tier 2. I'd be unfair for me to call on Kate to say what's the specific percentage of students who it is right now. But there, there are a lot of different needs that are being met within the regular setting every day. But our specialists are seeing a lot of kids too regularly.
Yeah. Right. Well, it's wonderful to know that you have goals for all of them, that you are looking at each of them instead of just those that are flagged for intensive interventions. Because I know in, kind of in, my own family's personal experience and what I see professionally a lot being in the special ed field is oftentimes kids who aren't flagged as needing intensive needs can fall through the cracks. So it's really good to know that we have our eyes on every student's needs, and so that we can track them and be able to pinpoint exactly what they need. So absolutely, that's wonderful to hear.
Great.
Mike, is this excuse me? Is this new types of data that we have? Like, we've never talked about this at the committee level. Yeah. So I know there've been a lot of changes to the curriculum. So I'm just, are these the data that you've got up here? So data points for us?
Yes and no. We've gone through, I would suppose, maybe the old pendulum or curve a little bit. We were using the DIBELS regularly at Warren, along with some other tests, and then we sort of got away from it, and now we're back to it. So, but there's always been a percentage of students who we were testing the dibbles, not necessarily, wasn't always every student.
Right.
Now it's every student we get this information on. It's always been the same skill set that you're looking for.
Yeah.
But I think now the population that we're hitting is greater.
Me?
Thank you, sorry, thank you.
Are we good to go to the next one?
Come on, Tina.
Next slide? Yeah.
Yep, sorry. I'm a novice.
I think we all are.
Yeah. So, I think I might have gone too far here.
Go back and click on the title.
No, we're good.
The grade level.
Yeah, we're good. So, oh yeah, I'm sorry, Kate, you're right. So to give you an example, one of the things that they're doing when they're having these meetings, okay, is they're looking at the focus areas and they're using a decision tree. Okay, so how are they determining which goals the students are going to have? How are they determining how they're going to make sure they're meeting these goals? They've created this decision tree with the help of the state again. So what are you doing in kindergarten? You're building foundational skills. Your fluency steps to make sure that they're continuing to advance. Does the student have a letter naming fluency? Are they in red or are they in green? You heard Kate say that red or yellow or green. If they're in red, okay, time to set a goal. All right. What's the benchmark going to be? They have to reach that certain benchmark. For its end of year, the number is 42. How are we going to get them there? We're going to focus on letter sounds. We're going to teach. We're going to improve letter sound accuracy and automaticity. There could be other goals as well. Once you go through this different decision tree, then we have to form small groups for intervention. Okay? So these are the tools that our teachers and our administrators and Kathy are using to make sure we're developing great interventions for our kids. And you can see, through this, I'm sitting here with my hands, like you can see it right here on the screen. You can't see my hands. But, what's the student group? How are we measuring? What are we using for a measurement? Where are they? What's the instructional focus area? And what are the interventions going to look like? And from that, we go and we set the specific goals. And we decide how often are they going to meet? What's our goal date? When are we going to meet again? What's the actual intervention plan? So really, really wonderful things happening during those data meetings that are driving the process. So we just took a quick look at what the student goal sheet could look like. Again, it's example, student name, what's the focus area, what's their baseline score, what's their goal score, and then what does the plan look like? The teachers, with the help of the administrators, and together are deciding what is this specific student's plan going to look like. The next set of data we're going to show, I really want us to take a look at this with a grain of salt. And that's because we have not been in school the way we need to be for the last few years. I still think it's some great data that we have here, and I think this data is important to look at. But I want us to understand that there's lots of work that needs to be done, and we know that. We also know that there are other tools out there to measure comprehension, and right now the tool that we're using is the BAS. We are continuing to look at different tools to measure student comprehension, but right now we're using the benchmark assessment system. And it's one of the only things we actually use K-5, so I wanted to not bring you iReady data. I wanted to be able to show you something that's used for every student in our district. Okay.
Can I ask a quick question too? Because I know the BAS is what we're using now, and that's because you have that data K-5, and because we've been using it for a few years, I don't know exactly how long, that's how we can measure growth right now. That's the data we can use to measure growth. Are you thinking of looking at another tool to be able to use K-5 to not just look at comprehension, but measure literacy growth on the whole?
We are.
Okay.
We are looking at different things. I don't think those will be in place for next year.
Sure.
But those are things that we're tasking our literacy team as a whole to look at. I think that one of the things we have to be careful about is throwing too many new things at people too fast. And right now, between just truly understanding the units of study, and then foundations, and then Hagerty. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And now to throw a new assessment in the mix, when we know we do have some assessment tools, we have to, pick our spots a little bit.
Sure. No, it's helpful just to know that it's on the radar.
Oh,
Yeah.
it is,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
I hope that you can see from this presentation alone that everything's on the radar right now in terms of student need. What you'll notice is the beginning of the year, all of our students are tested in the BAS. Not all of the students are tested in every grade level in the middle of the year, okay? Every student is tested at the end of the year, but we pick and choose who we're testing in the middle of the year based on how they did in the beginning of the year, okay? In grade 1, though, every student was tested in the middle of the year, or the great majority of the students. So 232 students were tested. 72% of these students had shown that they've made a half year's growth already. To me, that's pretty impressive stuff. Obviously, at the half year point, the goal is to make a half year's growth. Our goal for every student every year is to make a full year's growth. Now, I don't want you to be confused. That doesn't necessarily mean every student is going to be on grade level. Okay? It means every student is growing a full year. Obviously, our goal is always for every student to be on grade level, but sometimes it's just not in the cards at that particular moment. We have students that are coming in significantly below grade level. If they can grow 1 year, they're on the track. If they can grow over a year, wow, then we're really moving in the right place, right? But I do want you to understand that just because a student has grown a full year or half a year doesn't necessarily mean they're where they need to be, which is another reason we got to look at this data with a grain of salt, right?
So on that point, Mike, if the goal is ultimately, in an ideal world, every kid is at least at grade level, and you have kids coming in who are behind that, at what point are they supposed to catch up, right? I mean, it's obviously not going to happen all in 1 year, but...
So at what point did they catch up? I'll give you a tale of a young third grader that I knew who came into the Ashland Public Schools about 75% behind. So she came into third grade at more like a 2.2. There's this magician at Mendez named Portia Picello who was able to catch this kid up by half a year. That doesn't always happen, but it can. So I guess I bring up that story to say that everybody's different. Some students might not ever reach the full on grade level where we want them to be, but we're going to work as hard as we can to get them there. So I know I feel like I'm kind of avoiding the question mark, but it's really sometimes it doesn't happen, and I don't want to sit here and tell you it always does. And because that would be unrealistic to say, but that's why we have special education processes in place for those students who are particularly below grade level, who are well below 1 year of grade level. We do believe we can catch those other students up with really intensive interventions.
And I guess maybe a broader question is, it's the time frame on that, right? It seems like, depending on the circumstances, a student may struggle through 5th grade as an example, but by the time you get to high school, they've closed that gap. Yeah. And it seems like, I guess...
The goal is to close the gap before they leave Mendez.
Yeah.
That's always the goal, is because, the old adage, right? When you're first in K to 3, right, you're learning to read, and then beyond that, you're reading to learn, right? We want to make sure by the time they're out of Mendez that we've closed that gap as much as possible. Yeah.
And I would assume that, kind of keeping track of that data and kind of how quickly we're able to catch students up, kind of the percentage of students that are on grade level and whatnot is part of some of what you'll assess in those data meetings, right? And then also, kind of just thinking, obviously I know like so much of this is so new. And so over the next few years, we're really going to be able to see a lot of data in terms of how this changes the need for intervention, for special education and whatnot moving forward up through 3rd, 4th, 5th and into the middle school. Like, because I know, in the middle school, there are a number of kids who still need reading instruction, right? And so how much of that can we fix by putting in place this stronger foundational instruction, right? So I think keeping, kind of a close eye on what those numbers look like is going to be really important too, to really give us some good feedback in terms of
Yeah.
how well this is working,
Longitudinal data is key here,
Yeah.
right, to understand. But again, I think this is a great point for us to really start digging in, because we have incorporated and initiated new things. So to be able to truly compare apples to apples, I'm excited to track this grade 1. Right? I'm excited to track this current kindergarten class to see where they go. Obviously, we're going to be looking at the current 3, 4, and 5 data, but this population at Warren right now, these are the kids we really need to be looking at, because this is the first group that's really been able to benefit from some of these intervention strategies that we've employed.
Yeah, and this is kind of an aside, and maybe this is something we can talk about another time, but obviously, like, the kids who aren't in Warren right now, to be able to take advantage of some of this real strong foundational reading instruction that may be further on in their education that still needs some of these skills. Are the new tools that we're bringing in now going to be available? Is that coming
I promise
up?
I'll get there.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. So as you can see here, data from grade 1, and I don't think we need to go through every single one of these grade levels, but it's important to know that we're looking at it. Just a couple quick highlights though, right? 72% of these students have made half a year's growth. And we've got, 8% of the student population has already made greater than 1 year's growth. One thing that is important to see is when it says the less than 0.5 years growth, so less than the students that have made less than half a year growth, 23 of those students, or 36%, actually reached the grade level benchmark. So they would have stopped the test, stopped the assessment. So they may have made more growth, but we didn't take them further in the assessment measure. So it's really 18% of the students who are below where they need to be and have not made that half year's growth. So I think that's important to note. Grade 2, similar, 50% of our student population has made at least a half year's growth. Only 165 students were tested middle of the year. It's a smaller population, but it's less students that we needed to look at, because they don't necessarily test mid-year students who already were on track to be on grade level. We'll test them again at the end of the school year. In grade 3, you'll really see a difference now. So 199 students were tested at the beginning of the year. 57% of those students were at or above grade level. So we don't test everyone in the middle of the year, as I've said. So of the 82 students, it's important to note that these 82 students were below the benchmark. So for one reason or another, some of these students are English learners, some of these students are special education students, some of these students are just right now functioning at a lower level because their last time that they were in school for real was in first grade, when we all know is the most important year in terms of literacy development. Kindergarten and first grade are so important. We've got lots of work to do with our students who right now are struggling in third and fourth grade. We've got to make sure that we're focusing on that. And I could say that the literacy specialists in particular at Mendez are doing just that. They're seeing small groups. They're pulling students to make sure that we're utilizing Lexia, which is a wonderful tool. They're utilizing level literacy instruction. They're doing their best to make sure they're meeting the needs of these kids, because there are some students who haven't made that growth they need to make. But you will see that 20.5% of our kids have hit that range, and over 19% of students have almost made a full year in third grade already. 19% of the kids who were tested. Again, similar data in fourth grade. You can see that. We've got a couple kids actually who have gone over a year and a half already, which is wonderful. And remember, these are the students that were below in the beginning, so that's tremendous success. That's worth noting. And similar in grade 5. So move forward. Tina got us there a little bit with the segue. What are our next steps? What do we want to do? Well, first and foremost, it's not happening this year, but we've got to implement foundations at grade 3. We've got to make sure that happens. And once we're bringing it to grade 3, if there are students in the building who are going to need some support in that area, we're not just going to leave them behind. We're going to make sure, because now our literacy specialists will be trained in foundations as well. They can see those students. We're training our EL teachers in foundations. We're making sure that everyone who's going to be in front of students who are in need are going to be trained effectively. We're going to make sure they get the tools that they're necessary to succeed.
Mike, will the literacy specialist at Mendez also be trained in Hagerty when it comes on board
Yes.
next year?
Yeah. So that's next. Hagerty, Phonemic Awareness Program, will be implemented pre-K to 2.
Next bullet point.
I know, but I only saw till 2, so I had to
And then the
ask.
next line after that, you'll see Hagerty Phonemic Awareness Intervention Program, 3
there
to
we go, never
5,
mind. I didn't
with
keep that far ahead.
with teacher training. So we are there, and we are moving forward to make sure that all of our teachers that are going to be needing to support students are going to be doing so with phonological awareness and phonemic awareness, and that's what the Hagerty program is going to bring to us. We are going to finally purchase that true early literacy screener that's going to help us. We're not going to just be doing that paper and pencil dibbles anymore. M-Class, and we're going to be trained in that. Kate just told me that she talked to the trainers, and we're going to be lined up for a September training to make sure everybody's ready to good to go for that. That will be our early literacy screener. And we need to increase our use of decodable texts. While we feel real strongly about authentic literature and growing that, we also have to make sure we're putting more decodable texts in front of our students.
So I need you to tell me what that is.
So
Mr. Dibbles.
He's going to decode that for you.
Mr. Dibbles, I like that one. I've been called worse, Mark, I'll tell you that. So decodable texts, I'm gonna let one of our pros answer that better than me, probably. If I don't, I want you to come up and correct me here. But really, what they are they're texts that are allowing students to read specific words in a way that helps them to grow their vocabulary. So you're going to really focus on not a theme of a story, but rather a theme of sounds. So how am I sounding these words out the best I can, right? Did I do a decent job as your non-literacy
Kathy's like,
expert?
I can add to that a little bit.
Yeah.
It's applying the phonics skills they're learning in foundation.
You need to go up here though, Kate, because no one can hear you.
So it's applying all the phonics skills that they're learning in foundations to be able to decode words in the books and help them really be able to tap out each individual sound of, say, a CVC word, which is the word like cat, cat, and then blend it back together. So it's those early basic reading foundational skills they need, and then applying it to the text that they're being given.
I want to call her Mrs. Dibbles now.
There's always someone much smarter in the room. That's what I know. So next steps. Oh, I tapped it out for years, right? Yeah. Next steps. Data meetings. We need to improve our data meetings, and we have to make sure that we are doing this now K to 5, and we need to make sure we're doing it well and we're being consistent. The goal is going to be 5 times a year, and it's going to be to provide a lot of interventions for our teachers and to differentiate instructional plans. There's a word here that I think that we need to make sure we're always saying, and that's progress monitoring. We've got to make sure we're doing that on a regular basis to make sure our students are continually getting what they need. And how do you progress monitor? By assessing regularly, but also just by making sure that we're talking about this data with the teachers. Again, you saw this already, multi-tiered systems of support. We have a decision tree that was already created, and we are going to be implementing those all over. The next step for the data meetings is to dedicate the time. We've got to look at our schedule. The MTSS has a wonderful, DESI has a wonderful site that's helping you to create your schedule to make sure it incorporates the ability to do these meetings. So we have to take a look at that to make sure our schedules are put together well enough to infuse these meetings for our teachers and staff. And we've got a coach now. We've got a K to 5 coach. She can, the benefit that Kathy has brought to our school district right now is immeasurable. To know that we've got someone who is dedicated to this at the district level, K to 5, and that's her specialty, we truly are seeing conversations change because Kathy is having conversations at the administrative level and bringing it into the classroom on a regular basis. And the teachers are reacting to that. So if she can be at these data meetings, it's going to help move the needle for us. We saw the decision tree already. We took a look at that earlier. This is a great graphic in terms of what the data meetings are going to do. We'll have our first one in October. We'll look at the collection. We'll talk about things. The new group will be formed. We'll talk about what students are going to do, what intervention strategies are going to be put in place. You meet again in November, December. There are going to be new groups after that. Okay? Then it continues down the line until you have your 5th data meeting to see how you did. But I like this graphic that Kathy and Kate put in, because it truly shows you how we're going to make sure students are getting what they need in the role that our decision team is going to play in making sure that happens. So we also have the units of study, as you know. We have adopted that. We've implemented it. We're almost completely there in terms of feeling truly comfortable. We're ready to move forward. We've made a decision to move on from our consultant. We're confident that the work that she's done with Kathy has got us to a point where Kathy's ready to just roll with this to make sure she's getting our staff moving forward well. But we still know that we have to develop a scope and sequence for grammar at K-5. And develop a scope and sequence for sight words at K-2. It's something that has to happen. We've got to make sure that we're offering specific supports to really differentiate for our students. One of the weaknesses of the units of study is that it doesn't do a great job for our students who are particularly our English learners. We've got to make sure that we're doing that. I'm so excited that we're going to be making an announcement later on today in this meeting that the particular person is knowledgeable in the units of study and has gone through the work of making it work for English learners. That is just a wonderful opportunity for us to learn for her and make sure that she's part of this process. And we've got to research and determine additional intervention tools and assessment tools beyond necessarily what we're using now. We've started that process. We've got some work to do there. So if you can take away anything from this, we have a more systematic use of foundational skills assessments to inform our instruction. We've been doing that. We're exploring the use of decodables for the intervention. We're incorporating data meetings. We're going to be purchasing, ultimately, something that we've already used, and we're going to be implementing that for the screener. Foundations is coming in 3rd grade. A formal phonological awareness instruction will come as pre-K-2 and in 3-5 when needed. And we are developing a scope and sequence for sight words and grammar at the K-5 level. I know this was long. I appreciate the opportunity to do this. I again, so excited about where we're headed. I think we're in a good place. I think our students are going to benefit from this. And I also have mentioned these two folks, but I haven't talked about the wonderful teachers that we have who have completely bought in to what we're doing. And we should be really proud of the fact that they're all working so hard and they're so dedicated to make sure the kids are getting what they need. We have a wonderful group of teachers that are working with us, and our kids are lucky. So I know you've asked some questions throughout. If you have any more, I'm happy to answer them to the best of my ability, but I've got two people who I know can answer them if necessary.
Well, I just want to start by applauding you all. It's clear that you've done a ton of work on this, and it's been an ongoing effort. I think I'm very encouraged to see all of the programming being brought in, the instruction, and kind of the way that instruction is going to be so data driven, particularly for those youngest learners at Warren who are building that foundation that's so important for them to have. And so I want to applaud you all. It's clearly evident that you're very dedicated to this, and you've done a lot of work on it. I'm really encouraged to see it. I look forward to seeing that data as we move forward with it. I do have one question, though, kind of to your second to last slide about the units of study. Now, obviously, you're driving a big focus on phonemic awareness and phonics, which is so important in kind of that pre-K to 2 space, and I'm thrilled to see that. I think it was much needed. I'm really glad to see that all there. You know, and then the units of study is going to be the curriculum piece to look at, I think it was vocabulary and comprehension, right? Were those the two on that first slide? And so, you know, one of the, obviously, the units of study curriculum as written can be different than how it's implemented, right? I think it provides a great framework for how instruction can be delivered, but there were some holes which you talked about earlier in terms of the phonics and phonemic awareness piece, and we're obviously plugging those holes with the new curriculum we're bringing in. But one of the pieces of Calkins as it's written is kind of that 3 cueing system that's talked about, and so can you speak a little bit about how the new focus on phonemic awareness and phonics might look when that 3 cueing piece comes up with the Calkins instruction?
So we're putting a lot of emphasis on the small group instruction, and the intervention pieces are going to be primarily used through the phonics, the foundations, and the phonemic awareness, the Hagerty curriculum that we're putting into place. So that's where our neediest students, our highest students that need that intense intervention, that's where their focus area is going to be, not necessarily on the 3 cueing system. That instruction, the small group, will be focused on phonics and phonemic awareness. And if you saw from the groupings and the intervention pieces, that was what was highlighted on those sheets.
So those will be kind of in the interventions, but will that 3 cueing piece still be part of the class-wide instruction that's happening, or will that look a little bit different?
It's going to look different. Okay. So I just shared that document with you. That Lucy Calkins came out with new wording, and I heard you like Shifting the Balance, that book.
Yes.
Okay, yes. So I'm reading that, and we're going to be concentrating more on the visual, and we are moving away from that wording. Claire has come and met with all the teachers, and the MSV is not going to be happening. We're working on it. It's not going to just go away like that. Sure. But we are changing the wording, and Calkins has actually changed the wording too, and gave us all coaching prompts on how not to be using that guessing, like, oh, look at the picture, what makes sense, guess. So we are working on that, and it'll just take us some time to get the teachers used to that, so it won't be happening in the classroom.
That's great to hear.
Okay.
So I was going to just say this one takeaway for me is it just feels like there's a lot of momentum for what you're doing. I mean, I know this has been a work in progress and something that's been receiving a lot of attention. Maybe it's the way you presented it, but it just feels like you're really starting to gain steam in terms of what's going on in the buildings. And I'm looking at you because you were talking, but you guys are the ones doing it. He's just taking the credit for it. But no, all kidding aside.
I was going to say, I think I can give people a lot of credit here today, Mark.
No, it just is encouraging to me to get a sense of the energy that is being put into this, but also the people have for the work. Yeah. And that's great to see.
Yeah, I mean, we have folks who are passionate about early literacy. Thank you. I'm glad that you saw that.
Yeah, I saw it too. So thank you. And you put a lot of effort into this, and even more effort into the kids and what you're doing with them and making sure that they get what they need. And I know you have a great staff over there that's also doing the same. So thank you.
And I'll add my thanks on again. It's clear you guys have been working really hard at this, and I'm very encouraged. I know, Mike and I and Jim and I have had several conversations, about literacy, and it's very clear how much work has gone into this, and I'm thrilled to see it. I'm very proud of our district and the work that you all do, and I'm looking forward to seeing this roll out in full.
Great, thanks.
Thank you for that presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
Paul has to go under 45.
What's that?
Is that what it was? 45?
I think I started around 6:20.
All right.
48:29. Paul.
And it was our question.
Paul, that's your number. Oh, I know.
Well, Paul's going up for 45. I gotta go.
45 seconds, Paul. Go.
I'm feeling really, really comfortable, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you so much. Thanks for all you do.
Good idea.
You ready?
No, it's me.
It's you.
It's me next.
Oh, that's right. You're doing the update.
A couple things going on.
Yep.
So we'll start with, typically, again, Tina, these are odd years, meaning, we might typically have in February an opportunity to sit and have a conversation about where we are with our goals, my goals that we set. So even this year, setting them a little bit later. The mid-cycle review isn't about changing the goals that I have. It's, hey, let's do a check-in and a temperature of how things are going. And as you know, the goals that we have set are specifically related to the entire district for the most part. Mike just talked a lot about our last goal, which was literacy, and they're continuing to go through. I'm going to share my screen. I did share this with folks, but hopefully this will give you an idea of I wanted to give you an idea where we stand on lots of these, because not everything is going to be met, which is fine. I'm good with that. We've the literacy goals, for instance, are added goals that we had on the cycle last year, and that we're going to continue to have as a continuing goal of ours. But let me just talk about, and Jen Cutler is still on, I think. But when we talked about SEL and the DESA, and the things we were going to do. Oh shoot! I don't know why this is doing that. Sorry. Maybe I'm not going to be able to do it this way.
Is it?
Yeah, just do it like
here?
this. Yeah, it's printed. I did send it to folks.
I have it.
But looking at the training that we needed to do, we've completed a lot of these items. So when I looked at goal 1 throughout the 2021-22 school year, implementation procedure will be established, utilized in order to screen all students, grades K through 5. Again, focused on our SEL. Claudia, and Pete, we've done this. It's what still needs to happen, however, is the bottom pieces, right? The rescreening component in May, making sure that the social emotional competencies are being met, making sure that the lessons, even if today, if you're on Twitter, you would have seen one of the teachers actually made a big comment, love having Ms. McGuire in the classroom teaching SEL, right? So our counselors are in and working with our students. We will continue to then test the students in May. Jen is in the process of implementing teams for future years, for next year. Jen, if you're there, do you want to chime in at all on this component?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're great.
Okay, just making sure. So the DESA is the Devereaux Student Strengths Assessment, and it's a Tier 1 universal screener for SEL. And I'm really excited that we got to this point where we're able to have this K to 5. And, it'll take us a few years to really learn it, understand it, and use it to its full potential. But I think we've made a really good start. So all of the K to 5 students were screened initially in November and December. And actually right now, Mendez is doing most of their second rating period has been completed. They've been doing it during MCAS administration when the teachers have some time to rate their students during that. So it's really interesting to see the data come in and to see how our students are moving, increasing their sort of overall social emotional competency. And we've been doing some really great targeted tiered instruction to see how we could help our students who were in the needs instruction range. It's really very similar to honestly what Mike was just presenting in terms of literacy. It's really time for us to make sure that we're progress monitoring and using data to measure our SEL skills in our students so that we can make sure we're putting the right interventions in place. So this is really the beginning of that. And I think it correlates really nicely to what we're doing with literacy and math. And it's really where we need to be with our students. So this goal will completely be met by, the end of the school year.
Thanks, Jen. And we're going to go to goal 2, where we know we're not going to fully meet this one. So Jen and I had a conversation, just because partly we've developed these core teams at the middle school and the high school. But as we've looked at data and looked at interventions and looked at how to roll this out with students, the working teams have decided that when we're looking at these surveys, that starting at the beginning of the year makes the most sense. So they're developing strategies, and then beginning of 22-23. So this goal will carry forward. It will not be met, but it'll be something that we've got data now to use to set forth, the plans. Jen, did I miss that?
No, that was perfect. I would just add that we really want to make sure, I think, obviously with any initiative we're doing, that we have the buy-in. And I think sometimes with the social emotional practices, if we don't have that, I don't want to put all this time and investment into something that's not going to, see success because we haven't necessarily done it at the right time. So I think that, we have a really, we had 25 educators from representing all departments from the middle school and high school that were trained in the developmental relationships. And I have to say they exceeded my expectations and how excited they were about it. I was really, I know that I'm excited about all this stuff. This is my passion. But it was really neat to see the teachers really getting into it. And I said to them, okay, I need your advice now, because the buy-in is the hardest piece. And how are your colleagues, how can we get everyone on board with this to make our district a relationship rich culture, and really put all of these evidence-based practices in place and make it stick, and not make it just be something, flavor of the month, but really make it something that means something and is intentional and that we can continue to build on. And the biggest thing that they said is, this is something that we need to make sure we are, revisiting continually. We're fully integrating it into everything we're doing. It's coming up in staff meetings. It's coming up in our, curriculum meetings. And they recommended that that sort of first few days when we come back in August is a really good time to get staff on board and excited. And that's when, Jim and everyone says, okay, first 6 weeks of school, build these relationships. So it's kind of the perfect time for us to be putting in these evidence-based, like, okay, build relationships. Here's how you do that. So I'm sorry, Jim, I might have just said a little too much, but.
No, that was great, Jen. No, I mean.
Can I ask Jen a question?
Of course you can.
So Jen, what do you think are the obstacles to the buy-in? Do you think it's just one more thing for people to do? Or do you think it's more like they just don't take this seriously enough? And I don't want to put you on the spot, and I'm certainly not asking for any individuals who might have shared with you how they feel, but what's the problem?
I don't think it's I really don't think it's anything about not believing in it. I think it's more honestly being given the time to absorb it. A lot of times we present things and, we don't really have the time to put it in practice, apply it, it's not, sort of like the whole literacy process. It's a really ongoing, really big thing. And I look at, the relationship piece framework really as very similar to that. It's something that we need to make sure that we're really giving the time that it deserves. And so we always are competing, right, for figuring out when, we have all these little half days and right. Staff meetings, and we really need to, I think it just really needs to be carved out and really given the time it deserves, and that it's not a one and done. It just right. Never will be.
An hour PD session on it is not gonna cut
Correct.
It.
Yeah. Correct. So I definitely don't. I've seen really great buy-in for this. We've been trying to kind of find like since I've got here, like, find what is going to resonate with our middle school and high school staff, something that's doable, something that, developmentally, like it's so different at the elementary level than it is with our middle and high schoolers. So, I think we finally landed on something that does resonate with teachers of that age and of that age group, and that, we have a really good evidence base for it, and how this really does help our students of that age. So I think it's going to land really well. I just think it is all about timing and sort of everyone being behind it. Another thing that we're going to do is I talked to Jim and Mike about, making sure that our entire leadership team and our, awesome new members of it, that we all have a training in development relationships, because it's not just for the students, right? It's for all of us. We all, need to make sure we're developing these relationships with our staff, and our staff feel supported. And so I think, that's going to be an important piece that we're going to put in place this summer as we meet as our leadership team.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Jim, for letting me.
Sure.
interrupt.
No, I think I want to circle back to what Jen said. It's about competing interests, right?
Yeah,
And it's
I
finding
get it.
time.
Yeah.
And I think the majority of our staff would say building relationships is critically important to the success of our kids. It's just giving them the tools to again create those relationships and in a meaningful way. Competes with, okay, we just spent how much time on literacy, and our PD is focused there. And
Right.
how do we infuse it within a faculty meeting instead, right? How do we shift we approach our meeting structures that we have
Sure.
currently within our contract?
Yeah, I understand. I
yeah,
understand.
yeah. So the next goal, again, we just actually had our last meeting with Chris and Des when we talked about our culturally aware and our anti-racist awareness and actions. And the middle school and the high school have been working through this and creating their teams. We had a wonderful, what day was it? Tuesday last week? Yeah, last Tuesday we had, like I said, Chris and Des came in with the admin team, so it was our last meeting with them, working through a number of problems and concerns and working through our own belief systems, and it's really eye-opening. It was really eye-opening for all of us. We actually focused on poverty last week, not just looking at race, but how we as educators, are trying to break down the barriers of what poverty looks like, and how we're thinking about, is poverty impacting a student? As a teacher, are you thinking differently because someone is, financially insecure, they're not able to learn? Is it an issue with their family? Is it like, what are the preconceived notions we have about those individuals? So it's been really powerful, I think, working with them. I've actually asked Chris and Des, while our leadership team has completed our time with them, they're still working with Kelly and Dave, and that's the rest of this goal in their teams. I've actually asked them to consider coming back and helping us after we get the equity audit done, and to guide our leadership team in making some action items specific to the equity audit and the new strategic plan that's being developed. So, and they were quite amenable to that, which is great, because I think they've been really helpful to us. So you'll see it's ongoing. The work will always be ongoing. I don't think we'll ever complete this, right? But in terms of the actual action items, yes, we've got a CARES team. It's working. We've met as a leadership team. Mike's partnering with our area, and Ashland is United, and we're doing those things. Go-Ghost, I think we had mentioned this at one time. Maybe not in this group, but I think it came out of the area originally where we've talked about diversifying staff, and we were put in touch with this company. It's a startup company, and Mike and I met with the leader of the company, and they're not ready to go forward with their product yet. It's a human resource platform basically for putting diverse candidates into the education field, and they have asked us to partner and pilot when it's ready, which is great. I think it's going to be a pipeline for us, hopefully, once they get it moving. So District 4, improvement goal number 4, engagement. Hopefully you all are trying to get some time with ESMER, because part of this is your goal as well. So developing a district-wide communication plan, engagement of the Ashland community. What I would say is this: I have met, ESMER and I have talked a lot about where we're headed, and we've got a fantastic opportunity here in the next, really starting the summer when we have our directors on board, and I mean, the new director of student services, director of ELL, director of communications, and the director of SEL. I look at this as a 4-pronged approach to dealing with a lot of our community outreach, and the 4 of them coming together to figure out how to reach some of our disenfranchised families and folks who are not we're not able to reach. Today we started creating a document of all of our partners, and we're using it as part of the equity audit as well. But how often are we communicating with certain groups? What does that look like? What do we need to do better? ESMER's created a communication plan. Like I said, part of it is the school committee communication plan. What is it you're looking for us to do? And Jen Cutler, who's on the line still, she and I had a conversation, was we've got some grant programs that she's brought into the district, an SEL component. We need to be talking about this stuff. And how do we get that messaging out there? So I would say it's going to be ongoing, but there's a lot of success happening with press releases, with the school logo, letterhead. Like there's some stuff that we're starting to roll out and we'll be rolling out over the next few months, which you'll start seeing and say, oh wow, that's different. It's everyone's got the same A. There's craziness, but
yeah.
But the branding, it might, but as Esmer says, it has to come from me. I have to tell people, you have to stop using this.
Yeah.
This is, if you're going to represent the Ashland Public Schools,
Right.
This is the logo, these are the colors. And so she's working really hard, and I'm proud of the work she's been doing with this.
Excellent.
And the last component is the school strategic plan, the new blueprint for continuous student improvement. Today we had a kickoff meeting. You all got an email from me, but we had a kickoff meeting at myself, Chris, Esmer, and Mike with Hazard, Young, and Atea. They're going to be fantastic to work with. I thought that conversation today, it's a really streamlined process where there's going to be a lot of community input and forums, but in a really quick time frame, partly because, again, what I envision has been our equity audit and our strategic plan merging at the same point in time by the end of the year. So now we can dovetail all of this information with how we're going to move forward as a district, which is exciting. And it will lead us into conversations whether we want to approve these plans in June or really in July when the school committee gets together for a retreat, typically. And I think that might make most sense, but we'll have both documents done. And they were excited that, that I met with the equity folks yesterday and the strategic plan people today, and we talked about how they're going to come together, and they were amazed that we were doing both at the same time, like being able to pull them together, which is exciting. So that's really where we are. I wrote indicators of success. I thought we might have a new blueprint by June. It's not going to happen. Did I think there'd be a draft blueprint to you by April? Not going to happen. So I'm pretty clear here. We've adjusted it to June, and I've adjusted it to the summer of 2022 when we have our meetings. There's just a lot of work, and you all need to be a part of that work. They were pretty clear about that today, was who's driving the bus here? Is it, there are some districts where the school committee is the only one running the strategic plan, and I said, that's not what our school committee is about. They need to be a part of the process and what their thoughts are. So they'll be reaching out to you individually, as well as needing a kickoff time on the 28th of April, hopefully.
Is that going to be like an open meeting?
It would be an open meeting, correct, because all 5 of you would have to be together. It could be a workshop model as well. That's
right.
Correct.
We can have it maybe.
But we can have that conversation, but they need to have that date written down so they can commit their resources
Yeah,
to us as well.
sure. No, I'm just asking because
Yep.
we need to get it posted.
Yeah, well, yeah,
Time.
yeah, we've got time.
Yeah.
But I told them I would get back to them tomorrow, and
Yes.
I already got responses from
If you have-
enough
if you have a
people to say
quorum,
yes.
we can
Yeah.
do it.
Yep.
Yep.
So,
Put it in the calendar, right?
Yep.
so that's where we
I
are.
think I already have it. I gotta check.
In terms of the goals for the year, I feel very comfortable that we're going to hit, for the most part, completing the goals. Sorry, the last one was literacy. I don't know why.
We
talked about it.
though.
Yeah.
We
But the
got
last
that
one was
covered.
literacy. Yeah,
We
yeah.
hear where you're at with
Right.
that. Yes.
Again, it's another one that's ongoing.
Right.
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 So.
Right. And we're pleased that there's momentum, so
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah, there's great momentum.
Yeah.
So.
So, in the past, right, I give everyone a chance to give me their written input and it's a check-in. It's not the full evaluation at the end of the year. But honestly, Jim, it's almost going to be May by time, we get anything like that together. I don't know if you guys are up for some kind of different process, like if you have any concerns, you can let Jim know individually.
We kind of had that conversation, and I feel like in maybe like January, February.
We did.
You posed that question, and
Yeah.
And I think we
Hey,
didn't.
Mark,
Yeah,
can
I'm
you-
not hearing any.
Microphone?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
It's a process question.
Yeah, so what I had said was I thought we had kind of had a very brief conversation about that, and that there really wasn't there certainly wasn't anything of concern that I recall, just sort of recognition you're making progress and everything was moving along.
Right.
So,
This is just an opportunity to let Jim know if there's any pivot that's necessary or if there's any concerns. And like I said, in the past, we might take a couple weeks and everyone sends me their thoughts. But I think just timing-wise, we can just share here if anyone is concerned. Now is a good time to say it or to meet with Jim privately, individually. But I don't think we need to extend this process, this mid-year process any further than tonight.
Extend it all the way to May.
Because
Right.
it won't be
Well,
long
3
before
weeks,
we're
4
going to
weeks
be doing like the
6
full
weeks we'll be doing the
evaluation.
full evaluation.
We may be able to put it is there only one candidate running for school committee? Does anybody know the answer to that?
Mr. Kendall and Ms. Williams.
I mean,
both
two
have that.
candidates that are also.
I don't have a clue.
What I'm thinking that if there's not an outside candidate, that the chances are we can push this to June.
Yep.
No one else pulled papers. correct?
Okay.
great.
So it
Thanks,
looks like
Paul.
we'll be doing this closer to the end of the school year rather than the end, the election schedule. Okay?
Yep.
All
Works
right.
for me.
Yeah. And you're up next also
Right.
with the,
I would say, though, if you do want to go through the information and have questions, reach out to me. Certainly,
Right.
please. So, update on the Mendez Principal Search and the Director of English Language Learner Search. As you know by the emails I've sent to the community, we went through the Mendez Principal Search, and we had identified a candidate that we felt really comfortable with, and made an offer to Dr. Sermons, who is principal down in Rhode Island. He and I had some wonderful conversations. He's a wonderful instructional leader, and I think from the Mendez perspective would have been a fantastic choice for us to move us forward from an instructional standpoint. That being said, Sunday night he called me and said, hey, the superintendent of the Providence schools wants me to meet with him 5 o'clock on Monday evening. I said, fine. Listen, I have total respect for that. You've been upfront and honest about the whole situation. He was very comfortable with the contract in terms. It wasn't a compensation piece. He was clear with me on that. I think, the concern in Providence had to do with a lot of turnover at the upper level, and I think there was just some assurances that the upper management, if you will, was going to still be there, and that he was valued. And it was very clear when I talked to the deputy superintendent how much they valued him in the work he's been doing with turnaround, and I think that's his passion. And while his partner's going to be working at MGH, I'm sure they're, listen, you can get between
Find a
Providence and
middle ground.
Boston. It's
Yeah.
not that far.
Yeah.
So that being said, we do not have a candidate.
Start over.
So when I'm
at some point
tonight, no, what I'm going to, I actually I communicated with the Mendez staff today and said, I'm going to propose that after speaking to about 20 superintendents the past couple days, we're going to repost the Mendez search for a permanent principal starting tomorrow, but on a parallel track, be having conversations about an interim at the same time. So we did not do that component first, in the first 2 times we went through this process. But I feel like after speaking to other superintendents, there are some more high quality candidates that have been putting their name, their hat in the ring, if you will, over the past few weeks, which we were pretty early when we did this process. Now folks are getting into being finalists, and I've had a number of superintendents say, hey, Jim, you might want to consider this person now. They're going to be available, or et cetera. So, so I hold out hope.
Okay.
For that.
Will we be pulling together? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Tina.
I was going to say, will it be the same process? So there'll be a hiring committee pulled together? Okay.
Yeah. And Mike and I talked about that today. We
I still
want to
on
keep
it?
the same. We want to keep the same folks.
Back in action, Laurie. We're back.
We want to keep the same folks who have been a part of that process, if they're willing to.
Sure.
If not, we'll fill in.
That makes sense.
Folks,
An email will be going out tomorrow.
because they know the process.
Yeah.
I guess I had a similar question, maybe different angle, which is there anything you can do to expedite it so that, people are out there looking at different things, you can grab them before they sign up with somebody else?
The answer is yes, there is, right? So, if there are 3 or 4 really high quality candidates that after it's posted and I know that these are really high quality candidates, certainly we can move forward more quickly without having necessarily a full interview committee, if you will. Because eventually they're just coming to me
Right.
as the recommendation.
Right.
But
Our job is to narrow it down for you, but if
Right.
somebody in your world has already done that.
that's right.
Um,
And that's,
Right.
to your point, Mark, yes,
Yeah.
there is.
In terms of the hiring process, just want to bring up, there was an AshPAC board meeting last night, and one of the things that they of course were asking for an update on, kind of what the next steps in the Mendez principal search were. And my thought was that it would likely be an interim, because that's what I had thought was going to be the next step. But they said whatever it is and whatever that process looks like, they really valued being such a big part of this last hiring process, and would really want to, whatever the process looks like, be it the same hiring committee or something different, to be able to provide input. So they just asked me to share that with you. And I know that's something that's on your radar anyways, but just wanted to pass that along.
Yeah. So the process, again, probably formulated in my head over the past 24 hours.
Yeah.
So you couldn't have answered that question well
Sure,
yesterday.
yeah. Things change quick.
It was sort of the conversations I was having yesterday
Yeah.
at our Accept Collaborative board meeting with superintendents who are going through searches themselves right now. Solidified that I think we would be better off running parallel searches at the same time, but opening it up again. So, yeah. So, any questions on that, Mr. Kendall? You're over there. I'm used to looking at you, but I can't see you over there. So,
No.
Okay,
no,
great.
I know it's a shift because I was in the same boat as you, Tina. And so,
yeah. Like I said, it was a shift within the past 24 hours. There's no harm in it, and that was the conversation I had with other superintendents.
Sure.
There's really no harm in having a parallel track. We will be having conversations with folks that we think might be good interim solutions for us should we go down that road. So,
and they both bubble to the same place, right? They come to you for, they're coming up through you. So even if someone on an interim thing decides hey, this is a longer, better fit, then they're not exclusive processes, right?
correct. So, and then the last component is the Director of English Language Learner. As you saw the press release today, we are absolutely thrilled, excited to steal someone from Natick.
Finally.
And as Anna Nolan, the superintendent of Natick, said to me yesterday at the board meeting, you got a good one.
Oh, that's
You've
great.
got a good one. She's been, Christy Arnold has been in Natick for a long time. She's wrapping up her, I think, 5th year as an assistant principal and director of EL through K through 8, the way they have it designed over there. Her passion has been ELs. We brought her in, met with the admin team, EL teachers as well. And Anna, she's been working with Anna on her superintendent's license and doing an internship. And this is, as I think we said, this is her passion. And the work she's done, and I think we brought it up earlier about she comes, Natick also uses Calkins, but so she's been able to at least understand how to implement with our L students, the Calkins, the workshop model and the units of study. So that'll be nice to have her be able to have some conversations with Kathy and our leadership team. But she's an Ashland resident. She's got students in our district. And again, I'm just excited. This is as I said to her, this is an opportunity, right? It's like Jen Cutler had the opportunity to create that SEL department.
Mm-hmm.
Now we've got an opportunity to really create an ELL department. Kathy's on here, and thank you, Kathy. It's obviously that department has been in good hands with you. Wasn't your bailiwick when you started with us, and we've gone from 50 to 250 students who now need additional support. She was an L teacher as well. She knows the strategies. The L teachers are excited. As I said, there's this four-pronged approach I'm going to be taking with SEL, ELL, communications, as well as student services, working hand in hand. They have to for the betterment of all of our students. So it's exciting.
Very.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations.
And she will be here.
Fantastic.
She'll
Thank
come
you.
and meet folks
Good
at
job.
a later date. But
Yeah,
Excellent.
Great. So she's starting
July 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll
These
look
are all
forward to
July
meeting her.
appointments. So
Excellent.
Great.
All right.
and that's all I had.
Mr. Kendall.
Timer on.
Well, do we put a timer on
Oh.
for you? I think I'm going to beat you by a chunk too.
Oh yeah,
so.
it's my meeting.
So Mr. Adams, it's a chairs meeting.
Oh, no,
Can we
you
go back
don't.
to that evaluation? Let me share my
Notice I forgot the name tags and the flags tonight. It's the first time in 2.5 years.
Out of practice.
I'm surprised I remember where the building was.
Well, the challenge is Barbara used to bring that, right? So
Oh, that's
you
right.
haven't trained up Chris,
That's right.
enough on
Chris,
that.
you're on
So,
that.
so it's
Then
Chris's
Paul
fault.
did.
It's
Paul did
Chris's
for a
fault.
while. Yeah,
And the candy, by the way.
Then I made Paul take it.
right. Paul did it for a while.
Yeah, so I mean, Chris did it a couple times, right? Or I can't remember. Or was that?
No,
I
this
can't
is
remember.
Chris's first time joining us here in person,
Yeah.
except
Yeah.
for his interview.
Would have been nice to see you in person too, Paul.
But next time you come, Chris, just so you know, you're supposed to bring candy.
There's a bag of 2-year-old candy somewhere in your office.
I like Snickers.
Peppermint patties.
Yeah. All right, Paul.
All right, so I told
Yeah.
Jim to throw this on the agenda just because he and I went before FinCom, and so gave them this presentation, and it kind of let us look back at the last year. I mean, Jim and Mike have lived this with the rest of the group. So we had a hell of a year, and so I think this was a good time to. I've shared updates along the way, but I've been sometimes intentionally vague about the substance of that because it was still changing a lot, and so we've gotten to a point now where I think it's good to reflect on the year and what's gone on. So there's a lot of the relative to the budget and things like that in this presentation. So we started with just giving them the update on, when we started different things so we broke ground in November. So November, December, we were doing site clearing, securing the perimeter and installing the access road. And then January, February, we were doing the major excavation, blasting and rock processing. So the shot here is part of that work, particularly with the rock processing that's going on in the front here. And then when it comes to March was a big time. So we awarded the GMP for those remember. So GMP is very similar to awarding the contract to a lump sum general contractor like the public safety went through. So that's the end where we get that final contract that encompasses all of the trades and things like that. And then the other thing that happened shortly after we awarded the GMP is we had our first concrete pour on March 18th. So that was exciting. Up until then, it seemed like we were just playing in a big sandbox, right? So this was the first time we were putting in permanent things that weren't coming out aside from the drainage swale. So that was from then. So let me just show you what today looks like. So this was from today. So this is the right back here is that northwest corner, and this is the retaining wall that sits back into the hill. That the gymnasium will be off here to the left, and the calf, and then the kitchen and things like that set into the hills. That's what you're seeing here. They're finishing out. So that corner on the left-hand side here juts back towards the trees there, and they're going to be putting on they're doing all the rebar, going to put in the side of the form, and probably sometime next week pouring that. So, and this is just basically if I turned around from where I took that other photo, Fisk is off above those trees and off to the right. These are some of the other big rocks they're coming into. So to give you some context, this rock on top is one they were able to move with their equipment, and you can see it's larger than the vehicles. These two are ones that they're probably going to need to blast because they don't even have equipment on site that can move them. So just to give you an idea of what it currently looks like. So we're making some good progress, and so that's good, and hopefully we'll get everybody on site at some point. Yeah, we're getting more daylight, so that'll probably be more of an option. So we should probably schedule that. So this was all FinCom, so this is where we focused on the budget. So I'm happy to report that the project is still within the total project budget after awarding the GMP. But as I've said before here, it comes with a very large but. To do that, we had to make a lot of modifications through value engineering. And I say here we did more than 5.8. And the reason I say we did more than 5.8 is because I have a exact figure based on the estimates of what we value engineered out. But none of those numbers were updated. So when we took $4.5 million out of the project in May, last May, those numbers, as time went on, have not been updated. So with the escalation of everything else, I'm sure this number is significantly higher. We also got to the point where we could not make any more value engineering choices. There was nothing else to do that wouldn't substantively change the project and essentially not be delivering what we promised the community. So we transferred over $1 million of owner's change contingency into the construction budget. And this is not for changes. So just to balance the budget and be able to award the GMP, we transferred that. And what does that mean? So we're starting with a lower owner's contingency than you would. So a typical owner's contingency is about 5%, can be between 4 and 5%. So we started with a 4.2%. After the transfers, we're at 2.68. So we're on the lower side there. So there's risks there. The remaining risks relative to the project, because we've awarded that GMP. So we've gotten some certainty around things, but there's also risks that are still out there. Some of those risks are things that we have not acquired yet. So when you talk about the technology, fixtures, furnitures, and equipment, that FF&E budget that we talked about in the past, well, we haven't acquired those yet. So we have budget and things like that, but we're not acquiring them until next year. So hopefully those markets actually settle between now and then, but we don't know. We obviously, there's a lot of things we couldn't foresee throughout this process. Market supply and lead time issues. We rushed to have I think I mentioned it last time, we rushed to have an SBC meeting to talk about brick because there were no bricks on anybody's lots on the East Coast at all. So we had to rush to make a decision on the types of bricks we were going to use and things like that, so we could order them, because they went from a lead time of, on the order of weeks to, 20 plus weeks of lead time for brick. So we needed to rush to do that. And I fully expect us to find more issues relative to lead times on materials. So the risks there could be relative to either cost for getting things and making it a priority and getting ahead of people in line to get things, or schedule risk where we have to pay for weekend work or things like that to make up time in our schedule when these things occur. Unsuitable soils and over excavation. So one of the things that we did with the GMP, with the site contractor, we tried to shift a lot of the monies off of the contract and keep it on, if you will, our side of the fence. So we had control over that money, keep it on our side. So some of the over excavation soils, there might be allowances in the contract for. There wasn't. We took all those out of the contract, and so that's happening now. So where you saw those rocks, those are where they're excavating, where there's unsuitable soils for structural fill, and having to take those, export those off and replace that. And as of this week, I believe the figure is a little over $100,000. So just to give you some context on that, which that's in line with what we expected. So there's nothing strange about that, but it's just we don't expect something that's extraordinary there, but it's still a risk. Errors, omissions, and other design items. So that typically can be about a 1% of our contingency for just when you have something this large, things that weren't detailed properly, omissions or errors in the design that weren't accounted for. Unforeseen site conditions, just what else are we going to uncover when we start digging, right? And then unforeseen hazmat when we start taking down the building and doing those things. So those are still some of the outstanding risks with the project. Any questions before I kind of dive into just the high level of the budget and how it arrived at the different places?
No.
All right. So the first slide here kind of goes through just where we started and the high level of how we arrived at our total GMP and things like that. So our initial construction budget, and our construction budget had does not include pre-con, but the GMP does. So that's why it's listed this way. So that was a different line item in the budget for pre-con. There was $220,000 set aside for pre-con outside of the construction budget. So when in September, we took the surplus or the remaining that was in the pre-con budget line item and transferred that into the construction budget. And then we transferred $570,000 from our contingency in there. And so that was after 2 rounds of value. And we'll get into that in a little bit. So that was our new construction budget as of September. And then in March 10th, when we awarded the GMP and voted on the GMP, we transferred another $491,000 from contingency. So down on the right-hand side, you'll see that what came out of our contingency, what I'm calling an overage, was a little over $1 million that we couldn't value engineer anything out. And so that brought us to the construction budget here. The pre-con contract, so if you take the 28,000 that was up there, the 191, that's the 220 that we were mentioning before. So our construction budget plus pre-con matches the GMP. And the GMP is really the base GMP and our accepted alternates. And the reason the alternates has 3 asterisks down there is they weren't really alternates. So this base GMP, so to give you an idea of what we had to do to ensure our budgetary flexibility and how we were going to be able to award the GMP, that base GMP did not include bleachers in the gymnasium. It did not include ball fields at all. It was just grass. So those are the kind of things that that's how we were scraping bone with some of that stuff that was going on. Any questions on this? This is a very high level. I'll get into the other subsequent slides, give you a little bit more detail on these things. But so the next one is the value engineering. So we were, essentially, if you think about it, so we got a lot of value. Just I'll like to take a step back. So we did construction manager at risk. It's a delivery mechanism for a project where you hire the construction manager earlier on in the process at about 60% construction documents. And then they're part of your team. They talk to you about constructability. They're involved in that process. And they take on some of the estimating and things like that. And then you go through the bidding and different things. So I can tell you that, last, March and April, we were fat, dumb, and happy. The public safety building had just got, we had voted on both projects. Their project was a design bid build. That's where you do 100% CDs, fully designed, full documentation, and then low lump sum general contractor bid wins. They came in $7 million under budget. They added $1 million, which kind of brought it to the second, the second bidder's number, added that to the contingency just to accommodate any change orders that might come, right? So at that point, we were looking great, right? Then we had our design development estimate, and we're $4.5 million in the hole right out of the gate. So we had 2 meetings. The teams worked really hard. There were some things, and I'll say this about that 4.5. There are some things that are included here, and I think I have something that talks about that later on, that we would have done anyway. Value engineering occurs. I'll use the geothermal wells as an example. As the design comes further along, the original well field was 50 wells. I think we're down to 28, if I remember correctly. So we're right sizing that well field because we have more data for the model, right? So those kinds of things would happen anyway. So I don't want to pretend like that 4.5 would never have been done. Some of it would have been done. It wouldn't have been done in May. So this really escalated the value engineering we needed to do. And it wasn't value engineering. Some of it wasn't value engineering we would normally have done. So just give you that context. But that I can tell you that we really benefited from the construction manager at risk because of the ability, when it's not just a lump sum. There are 2 types of bidders. There's filed subtrade bidders where it's the normal lump sum low bid wins. So you take something like electrical. That's a filed sub bid, regular procurement laws, lump sum low bid. You take the site contractor and things like that. Those are not filed sub bids. They bid directly to Shaman. So what happens with those types of contractors is they're able to sit down with them, have these very in-depth de-scoping meetings to try to figure out where the costs are, ensure that they looked at the drawings the same way they were intended, and really work with them. And then they come back with a best and final bid. And then we have the choice to take the low, the second, or those kind of things. And that process really, really helped. So I'll just say that at some of these points too. So anyway, last May, we had the $4.5 million, 2 really good meetings to get us back on budget. And then, so we get to the 60% CD in September, and we're another 1.8 over. So, and there's not 1.8 we can do of any more value engineering. It's just not there. So we accepted 1.2, and then we transferred $599,000 from contingency. It's 570 from contingency, and the 28 from pre-con is when we kind of collected that, because at that point we had the pre-con contract and that budget squared away. So, and that got us to back on budget. And Then we went to the 90% set, and we were $120,000 over. And so we wouldn't really have normally done this. So the 90% CD here is, all we did is we took all the structures on the ball fields and things like that. We already did a few things to make them alternates, but we took, essentially packaged up all the ball field stuff as an alternate. And that got our base number back down on budget. Typically, we would have went out to bid without doing that, but because this is an MSBA project, our 90% submission needed balanced budget. So the base GMP has to be in line with our budget. So it's more of a shell game at that point to do that. So any questions on this? I know it's still high level. I've tried to boil the ocean with what's gone on over the past year. But. So here's some of the details on what happened in those timeframes. So in the May value engineering, we accepted 43 changes, and I'm not going to read the changes, but the big things that are substantive, right? So the outdoor classroom, if you're looking at the building on the right side of the building, that outdoor classroom space was originally supposed to be pavers. It's concrete now, right? And that doesn't make it's not bad as concrete, but it's not what we intended. It's not as good as pavers. We changed a slate to a brick veneer on the academic wings. We removed 3 out of the 5 display cases in the building, right? We did a lot of different things with this that we wouldn't want to do, right? And down here at the bottom is some of the things I kind of mentioned before. We would be normally doing VE, so there were drainage system updates, the number of geothermal wells, things like that would have been occurring anyway as time went on, that they're also rolled up into this. Any questions on anything you see here?
Questions?
So, I mean, one of the other things, and some of these things as the project goes on, I think is important that we talk about and potentially try to get back. Even things like handrails on the roof. The typical one was all the way around the perimeter roof, we wanted a handrail. Well, the design currently does not have that. It only has it on the areas needed for maintenance. And that's just from a cost perspective, that's what we needed to do. So the display cases, right? Elementary schools need display cases. So I think the 2 that are still there are by the art room and media centers. So we nixed the ones that were in the lobby and different other places. And so those are kind of things that, as the project goes along, we have the ability to do them. We want to try to get some of these back, or at least I want to have the conversations because I think some of these are still important. In September, we accepted 22 more changes, including reducing the parking lot. We placed the field irrigation as alternates. We got rid of 50% of our granite benches around the site. We removed the set. We had already on the first go around, we removed one half the bleachers. Here we removed the rest of the bleachers and put them as alternates, right? So. And then, these are some of the examples down here of the things we rejected because they just would have changed the building. So we have, if you've seen the renderings, the main component is brick, but like the entrance area in the admin suite is precast, and this was one of the things. Like, okay, we'll go all brick. And it would look institutional. It wouldn't do that. There's a couple areas where we have these phenolic wood panels in like the indoor courtyard and things like that. And personally, I'll just say that those are some of the places where those are the renderings that actually for me made me feel something. I'm like, wow, this is an amazing space. And I just personally would not want to change that. the outdoor, we talked about reducing the outdoor play surface. I mean, this is and these are just things that actually got onto the list that we rejected. There's whole other conversations that we had with the project team that we said, okay, project team, thanks for giving that to us, but no way in hell are we even putting that on the list to consider. So this just gives you an idea of not only what we did accept, but also some of the other things that were considered that just weren't going to happen. So any questions on that process we went through? As like I said, it was the team really stepped up, and the committee really did a great job. We had a lot of robust conversations. And Mike and Jim, please, if there's anything you want to add to any of these things, if I'm missing something, please feel free to jump in.
Paul, I do have a question for you. I mean, some of these things look like they're things that could be added at a later date if resources were available. You can add another bench. But some of the things also look like if you don't do them now, you may never do them, or it would be more expensive to do them later. Irrigation system, I'm guessing it's easier to put it in before you put grass down, or at least less disruptive. Other things, and I guess so my overarching question is, how many of the things that have been cut in some fashion are things that potentially could be added at a later date, meaning post opening of the building, and how much of a factor is sort of the ability to do that going into the decisions of what things are getting cut and which things are not?
Yeah, so there's two flavors to answer that, right? So when we talked about things and we accepted them as value engineering items, we had the option to either accept them and they're gone, right? If they're gone from the design. And then we had the option of accepting them, but placing them as bid alternates. And what that just means is they're in the package when that goes out to bid. And so they're competitively bid and we know the cost, but we don't have to accept them when we award the contract, right? So all the things marked alternates are things that we kept in the project and they're bid alternates, so that they're not in the base. So when somebody bids, they say, here's what the base is, and irrigation or benches or whatever the things are, here's the cost of that. And then when we award it, we can say, all right, we have the money to buy that now, or we can maybe look to the future for like bleachers, for example. If we couldn't get that day one, well, we won't need bleachers for 2 years, right? So we won't even have a place to put bleachers for 2 years. So we could try to get them later, and we would have a competitively bid cost to start a dialogue. So they couldn't come out of left field with a number. The sub would have already provided that. So those are two different things, and I'll tell you that all our alternates we got. So we were able to get that, and there'll be detail on what those are. But to your point, those are some of the other things that I've talked about, like the handrail around the roof. I look at that as like, if we can do that as part of the project, that makes more sense if we can get that back, because that might limit or might need to be part of, say, a photovoltaic installation. Right, if we want to use more of the roof that didn't have a handrail but now needs one, things like that. So there are several things that I personally want keeping an eye on and want to have a dialogue with them about as time goes on.
And so I guess a follow-up, and I'm just looking at like the couple other things on the list of removing raised stages in the music room and the media room. If the alternates are kind of things that you can decide what to do after you get a bid on them, why would, in some respects, why wouldn't everything just remain an alternate at least?
Well, so that's a good question. So there's a complicated answer. I'll try to simplify it. So there's two primary reasons or considerations when we do that, because it's a perfectly obvious question and valid question of like, well, why not everything just be an alternate? So there's the design cost, right? So some of these things, so if you're talking about precast versus brick or whatever, the designer, if we're having it as an alternate, they need to detail both things, right? If it's just a swap in materials that don't really, or I'll take the granite benches. Granite bench, plop it here. There's no design cost. They don't need to do anything. But there's other things that really have a substantial design cost, and they'd be duplicating work. And not only there's a cost from their perspective to do it, there's a risk of now we've burdened them with a lot more work, and the likelihood to miss something or something gets has an error is greater. So that's one of the things. So there's certainly, we had a lot of conversations about asking Flansburgh, what's the lift here of this being an alternate? So that's the first thing to consider. And then it comes to the type of subcontractor that it would go to. Because one of the other things for the differences between the filed sub bids and the non-filed, so they call them the trade bids as well. So the alternates have to be an ordered alternate. So if I have 10 alternates, it gets really complicated when I have too many alternates, not only from the design perspective, but the bidding, because with the trade filed sub trades, I have to order them and I have to accept them in the order. So if I had a list of 10, I can't take 1 through 5 and number 8. Can't do it. If I want number 8, I have to accept 1 through 7 as well. So it gets complicated. So those are the real reasons why we needed to pick and choose what was an alternate. So hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
But so the raised, the stage ones, those are ones that are on my radar to have a conversation, because that's not a big lift. That's, I believe those were going to be constructed. So they're carpentry. So they would be change orders. So we would certainly be paying them more for them than if they were in the base bid or competitively bid, but probably on the order of 15% more to do it as change order. But those are kind of the things where we want to have a conversation of, all right, what's the impact of having these versus not, or as an alternate is some portable or mobile thing better, right? But we have some time to address those. So those are definitely, now that we've gotten the GMP and the team's really head down right now trying to make sure all the procurement stuff is lined up. But we're going to be, really taking a look at that. And as we go through this, and hopefully, we'll have further conversations. You'll be able to come on site. Anybody that wants to chime in and can give you the full list of all the VE items we talked about and all the changes we did do. They're all documented. You can chime in with what you feel is important and valuable as well when it comes to that. Any other questions? So we had 6 alternates that were in the final bid packages. And so what we awarded was the GMP with alternates 1 through 5. And really we could have done the granite benches at that time, but they're literally the last thing you do, right? Plop one there. So there's just no reason to commit to that right now. And so we didn't do that at this point. We're still on there because, this is my personal opinion, granite benches at an elementary school are not just benches, right? The kids are going to be climbing on. They're going to be, it's part of their experience, right? So having them, I think, is important. I definitely want them in the project. I can't foresee not having them in the project, but we just didn't award it at this point. So then this kind of gives you the idea of those different things that we did the value. So you're talking the awarded ones were $900,000 of alternates. So, and I'll tell you that the team, and I'll have a slide on it later, the team did an amazing job, because if you talked to me 2 weeks before that, so you talked to me at the beginning of March, I thought at that point we were we were 1.5 to $2 million looking like we were going to be over. So it's a much different. It was a much different story, and so they did yeoman's work. They just busted their tails to get us to this point. So, so just to give you some idea of what we faced. So this is just construction cost escalation. So what did we face? We had our initial construction budget. We accepted $5.8 million, and again, we didn't update any of that number. So is that 7 million? Is that 8 million? I don't know what that number would be if it was updated as we went along. We transferred $1 million from contingency, and then if I just show you the big bid that went over. So our roofing bid was a $2.2 million package based on our estimates. It came in 1.1 over. So 50% over the estimates. And there's lots of reasons I can get into about that. It's just a crazy, and that happened, you know, in a blink. It was fine, it was fine, it was fine. And then literally it went crazy and we tried to get that, that out quickly. So that's over, if this number gets updated, that's well over 12% escalation. And the thing to keep in mind is, throughout this process, each one of these estimations had escalation built into it. So had escalation built into it based on the time it was being estimated to when we were going to go out to bid. So this is 12% over not just the real budget, but even with escalation. All those estimates included escalation. So, so this just breaks down the owner's change contingency that we did as well. And then, so this is the last slide. So, like I said, we had so many just really robust and thoughtful conversations with the team and the committee. You know, we were in lockstep with, you know, Michael was just from day one supportive. He had no appetite to not deliver what we promised, and you know we were all committed to doing that without an additional tax increase, right? So finding a way to do it with what we had, and again the project team just did an amazing job as well. So what does that mean for the future and what we're doing? So we've kind of hit on it before, but an immediate plan, and so I want to preface this with the sky isn't falling. Right, we're plugging forward, and we can.
Well, I needed that 30 minutes ago. The sky wasn't falling.
Yeah, so the sky isn't falling, right? So, if we don't, do we need this 250 right now? No, right? Is the contingency tight? Yes. Is that a lot tighter than it would normally be? Absolutely. So the immediate plan is, as we talked about, for our current operating budget, we left $250,000 there, and Jim and Chris are working with Michael on what the logistics of getting that 250 for the project into the project budget would be. But so that's our immediate plan. That helps ease some of that pressure for sure. And then the other things we've been talking about with Michael are, we do have the ARPA funds, right? So those might be there for assistance if we need them. And also, we do have a good capital account that, quite frankly, we have probably more projects than we have capacity to do. We have the funding for it, we just don't have the capacity to do it. So that's something that we can look to as well. So I know we threw a lot at you, but that kind of gets you to where we are and how we got there. It was a hell of a year, I can tell you that. How'd I do on time, Jim?
Who timed it?
He never pressed the button, but I think I won.
Oh, stop.
Paul, as always, your attention to detail is impeccable. Thank you for the update.
Yeah, well, your attention to the entire project.
Exactly.
So you're very much appreciated.
You guys have
As well as all
one of you guys, I think, has your sound on because it's getting echo. So, yeah. Paul, just one quick question, and I guess it's not necessarily one that has to be answered tonight, but you know, when you think about some of the smaller things in the scheme of things, like the benches or the display cases. Sometimes you go into a building and you see something's a gift of the X family or whatever. Is that something that, maybe obviously you can't really build that into the budget of a building, but is that something that might be appropriate under these circumstances to, see if there are people who want to sponsor something going back into it?
I was wondering the same thing, whether we
Yeah.
could do donations for
Right.
certain things, or is it too soon to consider that?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not, I won't say no, but I don't think there's a need for that, right? I think we're in pretty good, we're the sky isn't falling.
All right, we get it.
I'm
Yeah.
always a head down looking to the next thing person.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I said about the groundbreaking ceremony. It was a good way to just, somebody to say, hey, lift your head up out of the dirt and look and see that we're doing something right. So
Right, you're feeling a little reassured about
yeah,
some
no,
things.
so we're in a good spot. I'm not going to be happy until we get past some of these other hurdles as far as comfort levels.
Right.
Quite frankly, I'm going to have the team get a price and a bid on solar on the roof, right, and see what that looks like, and see whether that can be scheduled. It won't be part of the budget per se, because the MSBA isn't going to participate in that, but can it be part of the project day one and doing those things, right? So, and I can tell you that when we did all this, there's so many things that we did that were impacting, and we were able to maintain our EUI of, I think we ended up at 24.6 was the last model I saw. So that's the energy use intensity, so per square foot of the building, and so that was one of the only things that we could have done. We could have said, hey, do we want to get rid of things that would affect our sustainability? That's where we were. We were legitimately at those points during the year. So,
Well, thank you.
Thanks,
And-
Paul.
Yeah, Paul, and I think we're going to stick with you. You guys have done your updates, basically. Do you have anything else that you wanted to add? Yeah. So we're back to you, Paul, for the warrant approvals, if you have any.
I do. Let me bring that up. Hold on.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
All right. Between March 18th, 2022 and April 7th, 2022, I, Paul Kendall, authorized by my signature payables in the amount of $539,726.07. This includes general fund expenses of $446,102.08, revolving expenses of $69,940.65, and grant expenses of $23,613.46, and meals tax expenses of $69.88.
Thank you. Okay, next up, minutes of March 17th, 2022. You don't have them with me, but I don't remember having any concerns.
I didn't get a chance to look at them honestly, but
I didn't have any concern.
No concern. Are we comfortable? Do we have a motion? Paul, do you have anything on those minutes? March 17th?
No.
Okay.
Motion to approve the minutes of March 17th?
second.
All in favor? Tina?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Aye for me. Thank you. And then gifts and donations,
Sure.
please?
Yeah, we have a little bit. Follett, $200 to the book buyback program. Plan to Aid, $189.84, clothing donation, and for a total of $389.84.
Move to accept the gifts and donations as presented.
Second?
All in favor? Tina?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
An aye for me. Thank you. Member updates?
The only update I had was from AshPac, but I brought up what they wanted to share earlier when we were talking about the Mendez principal search.
I don't have anything that I can think of at the moment.
And Paul, was that your update?
Yeah, no, but just if anybody else, I brought Lori on site last week. So if anybody else wants to get on site, by all means. And you're welcome to join the SBC at our next meeting. I can share you when that's going to be. we're gonna do a site walk before our meeting, so I can share if that's when, you know, if you want to join us for that. It's gonna be April 19th. And I think I'm gonna schedule it for 5, now that we have enough light to push it that late, so.
Yeah, thank you for that, Paul. I highly recommend going over there. I got a private tour from, was it the construction manager? It wasn't, well, Paul was on the tour, but who gave us the tour?
It was John Seymour. Yeah, he's the senior superintendent for
Yeah,
Chatham.
so it was great, and it's just very exciting to see it happening in person, and so thank you for that. I'm not going to go into the great detail now because I'm sure I'll have another chance to share, but you heard from the students that the Make-A-Wish trip happened, and I did get to attend again as a chaperone. And the only thing I want to say tonight, it's an incredible experience, but our students are amazing. They really are. They're responsible and compassionate, and they get so much out of this. And we know that because I know Ms. Shields and Mr. McGann have high expectations for the students, and they make them aware of them before we leave. But what's amazing is so many adults at this property that see people all year long, different groups, approached me and said, these kids are like no other. Seriously, they said they stay longer than their shift. They asked to help when, you know, no one asked them. Their behavior was just amazing. Their families were so impressed, and there were probably at least 3 or 4 adults that sought me out just to say something like that. So we should all be very proud of that. And, you know, I'll give you more details about the trip when the kids come in to tell us more about it.
Great.
So that's all for tonight, I think.
Have anything else?
There's just action items, but there's nothing, unless anybody else has an update that we didn't get to know. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
And all in favor? Aye. Paul? Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for being
Thank you.
here.